James-SMTN.
How's it going, everybody, and welcome to Shin Megami Tensei Network Link 166. I'm your host, Spencer Presley, and joining me in a very rainy but somehow aesthetically pleasing to the ears, Allisa James right now. Hi, Allisa. I was just trying to think, do I say you're Allisa James as just the person, or should I just immediately hook you to the Megaten Marathon or Dualshockers? Which one has more corporate overlords holding over your name worth?
Funny enough, neither. I mean, I suppose Dualshockers is more of a stricter tie, just because I do get paid from the site.
Damn,
and
calling out the Megaten paychecks. I understand how it is. I know what that's like.
But they're very, very laid back about it. So, whatever would work best for you. Just as an aside, too, Dualshockers is where I actually did review Persona 5 Royale.
So yeah, Allisa, it's kind of weird. I've known about you as a person in terms of like coverage from I've read your stuff on Dualshockers. I never interacted with you really until recently, but I'd been wanting to do a kind of discussion about the reviews just because, as most people are maybe aware or not super aware of, Persona 5 Royal has just reviewed like crazy in the West. It's really crazy, especially because in Japan it got okay to middling reviews. Honestly, it reviewed in Japan the way I expected it to, where it reviewed the same as the vanilla version, but for whatever reason, when the Western press decided to review it, they acted like it was the second coming of RPGs. But so I really wanted to invite you on, and also thankfully you were the only person I always see liking or interacting with her Twitter post who is just that default Jack Frost picture, and so I was like, hey, this will be a good example, and in a really, really roundabout way, I guess kind of a really tiny crossover between both of our podcasts that are somewhat SMT related.
Yeah, that's actually a good way to look at it.
So a lot of crossing streams and whatnot for it. But if people out there don't know who you are, Allisa James, what is the rundown of who you are and how did you get into the series as a whole?
So I've been working off and on with Dualshockers, I guess you could say about 4 years. Currently, I'm a senior staff writer on the site. I also co-host a podcast called Megaten Marathon, and that's basically a podcast in which we run through different Shin Megami Tensei games and some spin-off games as well. And go through the plot, the gameplay, the battle systems. We kind of pick things apart. We also discuss the mythology of the games, and of course, Dualshockers is more of a traditional video game website where we have all sorts of overall coverage on video games in terms of news, previews, reviews, editorials, things like that. So in terms of me with Shin Megami Tensei, I would say my first one that I ever played was between Nocturne and 4. So I played those, and I absolutely fell in love with them. I played Persona 3 as well, and that was a huge gateway for me to actually get into other SMT games, and I ended up just falling in love with the entire franchise. I've been following it closely ever since. Been trying to play as many as I can in terms of the main line and the spin-offs. And of course, I started getting interested enough that I wanted to write editorials about it as well. I've done trailer analysis, I've done pieces on older games. Of course, I joined the podcast because I love dissecting the mythology behind it. And I had this great opportunity to review Persona 5 Royal, which was absolutely fantastic.
So, I don't know if this is going to be a difficult question to ask. What is, doesn't have to be a permanent stick, but when I ask you what is your go-to favorite SMT or Atlas kind of game, which one comes to your mind first right away, and which one is on your I need to actually get my hands on and play it game?
I would say my first one is right now probably Strange Journey. I absolutely love that game. I love the aesthetics because it has like that really cool golden age of sci-fi look to it, very retro.
And is not just in Japan for like the umpteenth time.
Exactly. It's actually global, and it has a very diverse group of adults, which is honestly great because you can only play as high school students so many times.
I have to ask before you get to like whatever your need to play it next is, what was your just general vibe on Strange Journey Redux?
It's probably right now my favorite Megaten game. It really took the original that I already loved and it improved on it in every way. And the fact that in interviews, the director outright stated that he looked over people's criticisms and things that they wanted to see incorporated with the game gameplay wise, and just really actually created fixes, like these great fixes to address all that. So it plays even better. It doesn't have as much of that that absolute killer difficulty you start getting into later on when it feels overwhelming. And of course I love the narrative. I love the new sections they incorporated, the new endings. I think it's a fantastic remaster.
You might be the most glowing person I've ever heard talk about. I keep having to stop myself because, like, for years when it got announced as Deep Strange Journey, that name always rolled off the tongue way better to me than Strange Journey Redux.
Yeah, agreed.
But that's so interesting because, yeah, like, when I hit it and a lot of other people, we kind of got into that weird one of, like, at first the big shock with Strange Journey on 3DS was like, okay, the art style is obviously a big departure. But honestly, when I started playing it, my problems just kind of added up in like little ways that kind of made me prefer the original more. Just like in a weird sense of like some of the music I was a little iffier on, as well as the big one for me. It's so disappointing, and obviously I get why financially Atlas did it, of like not voicing the game in English. But like when you have a game that is one of your few games that is not with only Japanese people, and they're only voiced by Japanese people, it's, like, pretty disheartening, because, like, imagine how great it would have been to hear all of these, like, because, like you're saying, like, it's such a great and diverse cast, like, it would have been great to be like, hey, let's get, like, some diverse, like, voice actors from all over the world to represent this, and they're like, no, we'll just rinse and repeat it.
Yeah, no, I agree. That's probably, like, when I think about it, that's one of the few issues that I had, that they really should have dubbed the game, honestly. And it did pretty well, too, so it would have been really nice to get that. And I think because if they had dubbed it just financially, it would have been able to reach out to a wider audience. Because I'm sure there were a lot of people that were kind of turned off because it was Japanese only.
And I mean, it even goes back to like Persona Q2. Like, I know that game financially probably took a big hit just because they were trying to save money with no voice acting. But I think something people forget really easily is like a large amount of like what makes Persona Q as a crossover really cool is seeing all of those characters you love coming back. And just because I say that like I love Ryuji or like I love Yosuke, like I love Yuri Lowenthal as Yosuke. I don't love the Japanese voice actor version. Like, he does a fine job of like telling the characters, but like they're their own different like piece of it. So like when it is just like one version, I know just the fact like when people found out that Q2 wasn't getting dubbed, they're like, oh, okay, well, outside of the fact that it's 2019 and asking someone to buy a 3DS game is already a pretty big ask, I know that one like hit people really, really hard, because like it's when you take that existing cast and just say, nope, you don't need it anymore, you're good.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it does turn off, like you said, a big part of the audience, because I'm sure the Japanese audience, like you said, they love that aspect of having the crossover and hearing their favorite VAs voicing these characters. And then when you bring it out to the West, but then you don't do the same thing with us, it's like, why do you expect a big chunk of your audience to be kind of like okay with that? You know, only a very small amount of people really know Japanese voice actors that well, and are so familiar to the point where, they'll be fans of them. A lot of people got introduced to this franchise through the English dub. So that would be a way to hook those same people into playing, a more niche title like, Persona Q.
Well, I appreciate you not just immediately figuring I'm just a big dub elitist, so thank you for
No,
that.
not at all. I love dubs too, so I understand.
So wheeling our way all the way back to the original question, what is, I guess, top of your pile of shame in terms of, man, I gotta beat this?
Oh man, that is a good question. I think one of them, and this is such a small title, is probably Persona If, which I don't know if you're
Oh, you
familiar.
mean SMTF?
Yeah, that's what
Okay.
I meant. Yes, exactly.
I only correct you just in case, because if I didn't, then it immediately would just be all the
Oh no, you're absolutely right, and that was my fault. That was a slip of the tongue. I don't know. I thought Persona because I was thinking of
Well,
the
because
fact
it's
that
so like it
yeah.
might as well be, because like it is the most predecessor. It is basically Persona 0. SMTF
Yeah,
is the predecessor of everything.
exactly. It connects SMT with Persona 1, so yeah, and that's what I was thinking about. But yeah, I actually do need to, and I have it too. I actually have the emulator for it on my PC. It's just sitting there, and I haven't touched it yet.
It's one of those. I mean, hey, at least you were okay playing it through the emulator. I'm in the weird camp of like I have played every like SMT game in the sense of like, oh, I've like gotten my hands on it and whatnot, but like
Yeah,
I'm always like one of those like I'd rather like not like force my way through it without like an official release, because I feel like at one point someone will be like, hey, you know how we have like a bajillion of these games that we've never released or like put into English? We should like do that one time or so. Like one of my tweets I made a couple of months back that like it kind of got a little bit bigger, but I wish more people had kind of gotten behind. Was it's so funny that even though Sega and Atlas are owned by the same parent company with Sega Sammy, it's like
right.
Sega is really, really good at least starting. They don't always follow through in the best of ways of like their Sega Ages branch of like getting into to restore these games, make an optimal version of them, put them out for the world, usually as like digital downloads, and they've been doing that ever since like I think the earliest one was like on Sega Saturn or even like Sega Genesis I know had one.
Right.
And like the fact that they've never done that for even one Atlas title is just so bewildering to me. Like I
It
was
is.
discussing in a chat with a couple other people of like Shin Megami Tensei 1 is a game that has only ever had one official English release that is now totally unplayable on iOS.
I know.
And the funniest thing about it is like even that wasn't like the best version of that game, cuz like there have been so many different versions, because it's like you can't just say, hey, here is the best version of SMT, because there have been so many ports on so many different systems. Like I had to explain to someone, like most people don't know that SMT had a Sega CD version, and it's not necessarily the prettiest, but it has like my favorite version of the soundtrack. So it'd be like, imagine how cool it'd be for like $10 they make a version of SMT in all the languages for everybody to enjoy and stuff, put it on like downloadable services, and have like a little toggle filter to be like, hey, do you want the Super Nintendo graphics? Do you want the mobile graphics? Do you want the Game Boy Advance graphics? Sega
Yeah.
version, let you pick the music. Because I mean, at their core, they're all basically the same game, so it wouldn't be like that hard to really just like throw that layer of paint on for everything. But it's just been a shame that like they haven't really done it, because I think like one of the things that really kicked it off for me is when they did that with Phantasy Star 1 and like added
Yeah.
in so many awesome features to that Switch port, cuz like Phantasy Star 1 is a great game, but
It
like to just
is.
like recommend someone to jump into that game blind, especially with how heavy you had to in the original versions, like making your own maps without getting lost, it was just like a nightmare.
That's true. Yeah.
But yeah, so
Yeah.
that's been one of the tough ones for it, but and you know, it's funny though you bring up like having even a version of If, like for the longest time, because that English translation wasn't even completed until what, like the last 5 or 10 years.
Yeah, it's very recent. I
Mm-hmm.
believe along with the second game too. That was actually how I played Shin Megami Tensei 2.
The fact, by the way, that we have just like no one has ever held anyone at Atlas accountable for the fact that they have a series where they just straight up have never released the second title in the mainline series. Like that's almost as weird as the fact that Square took like 20 plus years to release Final Fantasy 3.
Yeah, it is the actual one. Yes.
And it's like kind of one of those weird ones of like I don't even know what I would want because like SMT2 is a really really great game in terms of like
It's
it's got a
fantastic.
lot of great mythology and like stuff behind it with like all like the deities and all like the elements behind the story and like the setting is
Yeah.
so amazing. But like the funniest thing about it is like I don't know if that game like having like a actual remake of that game unless you just made it like really offensively like mobileified like some of the earlier Square ports of like I don't know how you could like HD that game quickly and cheaply and making it worth it, just because it's like all the people now with like Final Fantasy VII of like, hey, if you guys want us to remake Final Fantasy VII, this is going to be like the most expensive game of all time.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's like kind of like that weird double-edged sword of it's like, hey, I'm sure the fans would appreciate if they just did a ROM hack and just released it somewhere, just like pay some intern or whatever to do a translation, but it's kind of a bummer. But I mean, hey, at the same time, they did pay like 8 people to translate Persona 5 Royal into 4 different languages. So I mean, when you were going through the credits, by the way, did you notice that about the English, French, Italian, and Spanish section that like there's like over like a dozen people who worked on the English translation, and then for every other language it was just 2 people.
Yeah,
I saw that and I was like, oh no.
I felt so bad for them. I was like, how did they do this whole game by themselves?
I mean, it made me feel like a lot less inclined to like be critical of like cuz like the translations have it's kind of that one's also a weird double-edged sword of from the international community of a lot of them have just kind of been taking it in stride of like it's not perfect but it's like the best attempt we've had in like years of having multilingual support, so it's like, hey, it's cool you did it but it just wasn't perfect. But yeah, when I saw how few people actually worked on it, I was like, man, I hope those people got paid well because I cannot imagine having to like put that entire script into it, like even just like, but because like at 2 people, you might as well have just like given it to like Google Translator or one person.
Exactly. And then it also makes you appreciate more like the kind of work that goes into the localization process for like English, That it's this entire team, and in order to get the kind of translation that we get, a lot of effort and time and manpower has to go into it. And then when you kind of see what other countries get, and like you said, this is like the biggest attempt you've seen in years with this sort of thing. And when you look at it, like how little was put towards them, for I'm sure various budget constraint reasons, but it's still kind of like, wow, like we got it good.
You know what? I will say this. It's definitely like a mixed bag, at least with Royal in terms of the English translation. I was never in the camp of I thought it was like gutter tier trash because like there were some hardcore like fans who acted like when Persona 5 originally came out 3 years ago that like, wow, this is like a huge step down in quality. For me, it was always like it was noticeable that it was definitely in different hands than like Persona 3 and 4's
Yeah,
translation
exactly.
team, but there never really felt like that ease in progress. Like I'll say this, I never felt that with any of the games after the fact. I was just like, obviously they were a lot smaller in scope, but then when it comes to stuff like the newly added conversations, whether it be the text calls with the confidants or even just the entirety of the third semester. When I'm in the
Right.
third semester, you might as well have just started a new game. Because it's like, oh my god, like who wrote this? Where was this guy in the rest of the game? Because like if the whole game felt like the third semester, I would understand why people were giving it 10s. Like I'm kind of going into like our main point for it, because I loved the third semester so much that it was just like, it was just so odd to me. Of just like how good it was, and also the same fact that I was like, oh my god, I'm not going to have to wait because like seriously, like the third semester and the fact that like how little of it was like marketed was a big thing of like for me, as someone kind of covering it as like a fan for like the podcast and like our community, was really frustrating to me because I would see stuff like their preview event. Actually, you went to the preview event out in LA, right?
Yeah, I did.
Okay, I definitely have to pick your brain for this because I've only ever asked the guy who runs the fan site Skull what he kind of thought of it, but I'd be curious to see what someone in the media would kind of think of it. Because for me, I was so frustrated by those previews. Those previews annoyed me to no extent because it literally felt like Atlas flew people out, and all the articles that came out of it for the majority were like, there's a redhead girl, there's a grappling hook, you can see the darts? There's darts now. And I'm like, no one is going to buy this game because of a redhead girl, a grappling hook, and darts. It was, like, so bewildering to me because, like, they had the way it was set up with, like, the 4 save slots. Like, I get it because the third semester is so kind of spoilery heavy. But at the same time, this game is 3 years old. And all of the best stuff in that game, along with the new art, the new costumes, and even, like, because, like, they show you that palace before you're even in the third semester. And even when you're in that, I'm like, wow, this is very different. So, like, there were ways to, I think, preview that game better, at least for me personally, that I just thought it was frustrating because not only was the preview coverage very similar to what regular coverage of Persona 5 was for the press for me, on top of that there were then people who were walking away from that press event who were like, oh, this just kind of felt like more Persona 5, which, like, hey, I'm about to play Resident Evil 3 and Final Fantasy 7 Remake, like, why would I do that? So it's like, it was also kind of adding on to the fact, because if you remember back in December when they announced the release date for March 31st, I don't know how you felt about it, but when they announced that date, me and everyone else was like, what are you doing? That was the worst release date possible. Like, what are you thinking? Like, that's so stupid. And then now, like, just how much has changed in 3 months with, like, the situation going on. Now all these people I know are playing it and like, oh my god, thank god this 100-hour plus game came out.
Exactly. So it's kind of interesting how that worked out.
They have got to be, like, counting their chickens for the fact that they not, like, lucked out in a really morbid sense, but more like, we're very fortunate games got delayed, pushed around, and that the world got into this weird, like, pandemic state.
Exactly, yeah. So it ended up being the perfect time for that kind of long RPG to come out. But, yeah, in terms of the press event, the event itself, I mean, I don't know if you've seen the pictures that I took of the actual venue, was phenomenal. And so, yeah, it was kind of interesting when I actually played the preview, because it was the 4 save files. That's why I did try to break things down as much as I could in terms of, like, the things that I noticed were different, like in terms of the boss battle with Kamoshida. Of course, you had the darts. The problem was, too, is that the 4 save files didn't have Kasumi in it, so
yeah, and, like,
I couldn't write about it at all.
Yeah, that was really tough, because the only thing they showed, or that you would see in that whole game of Kasumi, is, hey, you can walk to the train station with her. And it was like, and what was even more frustrating is you would see people writing in their previews like, oh, Kasumi's already best girl. And I'm like, bro, I've seen what you've seen. You walked a girl to the train, like, you just... Like,
exactly.
What are you saying about your, like, how low are your standards to fall in love with a woman if this is all it takes to make waifu material?
Exactly. So I was trying to be more, at least when the way I tackled it, you know, I was more honest about what I actually did experience. So I broke that down instead. And it's like, if I can't speak on her, I'm not going to. And, you know, it'll just have to be that. But I do wish that one of the save files was at least maybe some cutscenes or something, or like that first time that you jump in the dungeon with her, which wasn't that far in the game. That would have been a great way to kind of introduce her, because that dungeon wasn't very spoilery on her character at all.
Yeah, because you don't know whose palace it is. You don't know what they're doing there. It at least has a battle in there, so you can kind of get a glimpse of her for at least a little bit longer than, like, the casino. Like, the casino, when I was writing my, like, review, like, my opening lines for describing the casino is Persona 5 Royale's, like, biggest facade. The opening casino act, like, tries to make you think, like, Persona 5 Royale is going to be this huge, different game. Look, there's a new character, there's a grappling hook, and then immediately just throws you back into April and is like, nah, psych, I'll see you in January.
Yeah. Exactly. And then when you actually play through it, you kind of see all the other differences. But like you said, it's very different from what they kind of set up for you in the beginning of how those differences are going to present itself. Because it doesn't present like that. It's not a radically different game. It's just that, you know, you have the new content, the new area, Kichijoji, the mini games, and of course, like, the new little cutscenes and other gameplay balances with that. And those are the things that, you know, makes it feel more updated, but not like they just took this game and just broke it down and made it completely different. No, that's not it at all.
Yeah, because I feel like, and this is again kind of stealing from my review, but I feel like following the Japanese marketing leading up to its release, as well as some of the Western marketing, I feel like they've been trying to sell Persona 5 Royal as, look at this brand new experience. This is the de facto way to experience Persona 5. When in reality, like, it does a lot of great quality of life changes and stuff for it. But, like, until you get to that third semester, you're basically just playing a glorified director's cut.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Which is really funny because also at the same time, this game is not directed by the game's original director, so it's like... I guess it's like a dude who had to become the director's cut, but I mean, he does a great job. Like, in terms of how the content is laid out and stuff.
I
like,
agree.
The amount of, like, real complaints that was just kind of weird. But, yeah, my other little weird thing with the preview event was, I don't know if this really got brought up for it, but when you eventually got all the way out there and then realized that it was the full version of the game basically, but just like in 4 slots you guys had like time periods, because like at that point the game was already done and like through certain stuff, because you guys like got review codes like what, a week after the preview event?
Yeah, like a couple weeks or so after.
Like, that was the weirdest thing to me, of like, okay, so the preview event was like in the middle or like kind of beginning part of February, and then at the end of February, I know people had review codes. Yes. So it even then more so kind of just made me scratch my head of like, why would you not just give these people? Because like normally what happened like with did you review the original Persona 5?
No, I did not. That was another writer who works for another site now. Okay, but I did play the original.
So normally with a lot of the way Atlus has done their titles in the past is like their games are done like 2 or 3 months before they actually get printed off and like sent out to people. So they will give you the copy pretty well in advance because these games are really long.
They normally do.
What happened would be like, hey, here's the full game and here's the preview embargo. Like, let's say you get to the halfway point or whatever of the game, don't talk anything. Like, what would almost be like my embargo because for whatever reason I got thrown into the like media streaming one, which is really hilarious because I can barely stream any game at all. So like my embargo instructions were like, don't stream anything past September. And I was like, well, great. The game doesn't let me stream anything past September anyways, and I'm not buying a capture card or whatever. But it was one of those things of, even that I think would have been a lot more helpful. Because, yes, getting to the end of December is basically just saying, hey, play all of Persona 5 again. But even that, once you've collectively played through the whole vanilla game with all the new features, you get enough of a kind of gauge, because at that point you've seen more than just one boss fight be different. You've seen all the new aspects they added to like Mementos, because actually I'm trying to think, Mementos wasn't even in the preview build, right?
No, it wasn't.
Which is kind of weird to me, because like I'm already in the weirdo camp of when I played through Persona 5, I actually really liked Mementos, so all the stuff they added was just even better to me. Like, I know it can be pretty, like, draining with, like, the song and stuff, but, like, hey, look, there's now new songs, you can collect stamps. So, like, even, like, little things like that was just kind of weird that they didn't, like, really show off, but yeah, so, like, it's always kind of made me, like, scratch my head of, like, I feel like if you're going to do a preview event, you have to be really kind of far away from by the time the game's done, because that was basically just, like, hey, we're going to fly a bunch of people out, and also just give them the game like 2 weeks later, because like I feel like what were those previews doing a month before you review that you couldn't have just waited a month and like, because like I can't imagine many more people really got sold from all of those previews as opposed to all the glowing reviews that came out in March.
Yeah, that is a good point. I mean, I know the event it was interesting because the venue itself was so well done, you know. Like, I don't know if have you seen pictures of like other people?
Yeah, I'd seen the stuff you'd put up as well as a lot of like videos and stuff where like one of the big takeaways for me, it sort of felt like, and this isn't even a insult, it felt to me like a rap party for the game and the voice actors, and then they just happened to bring press out to check out the game, because there were so many people there from like voice actors as well as like like I saw more voice actors and people who work at Atlus than actual press out there for me, so it was just kind of like, okay, so is it just kind of more for like them, and then there just happens to be the game. It almost feels like to me it would have been better as like a public event of like, hey, just let people in and like don't act like it's going to be like a big like, hey, we're going to reveal a bunch of stuff for it.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I mean, I don't know if it would be good full public because that venue is rather small. But...
Yeah, that's true. But I mean, like, they did a similar thing with Catherine Full Body, I think either at AX last year or right after it, where they basically like rented out a bar and let people check out the game, but it was mainly just to like hang out, have fun, and drink.
That's true. Yeah, that kind of event would have been nice, actually, if they had done it. And I wish, too, because it was such a nice venue that I wish more people could have enjoyed it because it was very pleasant. But yeah, I agree. Like, if you were going to tie it in with the preview event, I think it would have been great if we saw, as we were talking about, more of the game itself. Like, we could really dig into, like, some of the improvements on mementos, dig into that first time you get in the dungeon with Kasumi, maybe see a bit of Maruki in the beginning when he's introduced in, like, a couple, just like the little clips of him speaking with some of the earlier characters like Ryuji and An and things like that, so we can get a feel of, oh, okay, so that's how these characters, interact. And then you can have, the save file with the grappling hook, and then, of course, with the Kamoshida boss, so you get how they started changing some of the boss fights and things like that. And that way, and if they had the preview event earlier instead of February, maybe like in December or January would have been better. I would prefer December probably. And that way, too, it could help build up, I think, a little more hype in a sense, because now it's like you kind of have this deeper coverage of these previews, and then it's way before the game actually releases. So then, of course, when people get the game, people already kind of followed along with what was going on with the preview builds and everything.
Well, and also, I don't know how well you had kind of been following everything for it, but if you remember, the game's preview event, like, big embargo date, was originally going to be February 20th, or, like, I think might even be the 22nd. But no, it was because it was 2/20/20, because it was the same day that Scramble came out in Japan, and I thought that was so funny. I'm just like, man, like, not already have you, like, guys not somehow, after a year of this game getting announced, somehow still not announced that Scramble is happening in the West, even though everyone knows it is? But, like, the fact that, like, okay, let's be real, who, like, out of all the stuff people are going to watch more, people going to, like, watch all of this new preview coverage for a game that has been out already and is a re-release of another game, or the one that is being advertised as, hey, here is the full-on sequel to Persona 5?
That is true.
And, like, so that was a weird one for me of, like, a lot of February was me kind of being down, not on Royal as, like, oh, I'm not excited about it, of just, like, hey, I've already imported my copy of Royal, and I'm playing this, like, when all the previews are going up, and I'm like, man, I'm enjoying this way, way, way more than Royal, and it looks like so far. So that was kind of like a weird one for it, but it definitely did bounce around, because I have a weird history of, even though I'd had a review copy of Persona 3 for, like, ever and ever and ever, I actually didn't beat it until March of this year for the first time.
Oh, really?
I know, yeah. What a fake fan I am. I've been doing
this.
It's so funny because I am always amazed that no one has ever called me out for this. I've never had anyone be like, man, look at this phony. He's been doing this show since, like, 2012 and he can't even beat Persona 5, like the one that most people have beaten who probably listen to this show. But it's, like, so funny to me just because I had so many different personal reasons, like, keep me from beating it. And I was just so hell-bent on, like, okay, I'm not going to play Royal until I beat P5, because I know not a lot of reviewers were going to do that, because guess what? That's insane. Why would you play this game that is basically going to be a large carbon copy of the same? But I had this big thing in my head of I really wanted to just play them, not only so I could, like, finally knock that off my, like, I guess, like, list of, like, shame or whatever from, like, stuff I hadn't played, but just because, like, I knew the differences were going to be so tiny that I've had a lot of cases of me telling people, oh, hey, look at this thing that's new, and they're like, oh, that wasn't in there before? Which obviously is a compliment to Royal. Like, when you have something implemented into a game that's new and people can't even tell that, like, oh, hey, this is new, like, a lot of the voice acting scenes for the tinier stuff has been, like, me telling people that and be like, oh, I just figured that was already voiced, because it came out, like, 3 years ago. Now, I should have asked you this, like, towards the beginning of the show, but it'll lead into what we're talking to pretty well. How long have you actually been writing and covering games yourself?
Let me think. I first started when I think back in 2013, so fairly recently.
Do you remember the first thing you published that wasn't for, like, a self, like, written blog?
Yeah, that was around the time I actually first started working for Dualshockers. I was back in 2013. I worked with them for 3 years, took a little break, and then I came back to the site. So they actually were very nice because I was pretty green. I had a college degree, but I had no experience with video game writing. but they took a chance on me. I think partially because I can read Japanese, so.
You get brownie points for that.
Thanks. So they took a chance on me and they just trained me up, and I started writing news, and then I started just getting into editorial writing, and did my reviews. And my second review was actually Shin Megami Tensei 4, so that was pretty cool.
That's a really cool start. Yeah, mine. I'd been writing since 2012. I remember and that was the senior year of high school for me, just to date me. But I had been really, really interested in like video game magazines for the longest time, and not so much with like online editorial stuff. And as I'd been getting into podcasts and whatnot, it really motivated me to not only start podcasting but also to like start writing. So I've been doing like self-written stuff for a while, and then I remember my very first article I ever like wrote was for someone else was like, and this is like so like sticky or whatever, but at the time I was so happy about it. It was a top 10 what was it? It was a top 10 games I wanted to see like HD remasters for, because that was in that era of like pre-next gen, but like HD remasters from like PS2 was really big. And I remember like I was like so nervous about that going up, of like, oh my god, like it was on this website called like Gaming Union Network, and I've been like a fan of theirs for like so long and long and long, and then I had gone from, okay, I'm gonna contribute some writing, to like, let's say in a year I then became daily news editor. I helped with review editing. I did like basically half the reviews as well. I did all of the PR and marketing in terms of making and contacting, and basically I just threw myself in as much as I humanly possibly could, because I was like, hey, I'm a kid with way too much free time. I am single in college and I have way more money than I know what to do with, so I'm going to get as many codes or buy as many games so I can talk about as humanly possible.
That's actually incredible, though. You did all that for that site.
It was fun, because that one was and I'm still friends with a lot of people who like worked there. Like the site is definitely more like in a sort of back burner sort of state. They had a lot of sister sites that blew up more than the main one. So I know the site's owner and his wife, Daryl and Lauren, they work on Final Fantasy Union, so they do a lot of just like Final Fantasy stuff, and they have like Kingdom Hearts Union and a bunch of other sites for that. But yeah, that was just like a really big passion project for me, of not only getting my foot in the door. That definitely helped, but also just led to a lot of like contacts, because one of my favorite stories with that was when I started doing reviews. They were like, hey, we have a lot of European press contacts, but their person who worked on the site and had all the Western PR people, he basically just like took all the people's PR contacts and codes and just auto-filled it to his personal email, and then just kind of like bailed, so he could just get codes for reviews and previews, but never ended up giving them to any of us to review.
Oh, wow.
So I then had the Herculean effort of me at the age of like 19 literally cold calling like all these publishers and developers, and just being like, can we please have a media press or contact list? I know I'm just this sad boy from Kansas, but I really promise you someone's going to review your game if you give me a code. Because I'll never forget that era of, and I'm so glad I got in before it was like next gen. I was in that era of when someone like a Sony or like a Deep Silver or other companies, even like Square Enix, when they would give you a review code, they would FedEx overnight ship it, like the hard copy to you. And
I remember that.
And that feeling of like me, like as a kid in my mom's home, and I'm just getting like this copy. I think the first copy I ever got like physically was Dead Island Riptide. I got 2 copies sent to me in the mail like a month before it came out, and I remember taking pictures to my friends, be like, "Oh my god, look, it's not even out yet." And they're like, "Oh, like, are you really that excited about the game?" And I was like, "No, but look, I got the game early. I'm gonna be playing it."
Yeah, no, that's an incredible feeling. I think when you actually start getting those early review copies, I think it kind of cements that you're acknowledged. That you actually are important enough that these publishers actually consider your opinion, and they're willing to send you this game because they want you to write a review for it. And I think it's such a great turning point when you start getting into video game writing, when you get to that point that you don't have to buy your own games anymore. You actually get those copies. So I totally understand. I remember I was like just so over the moon. Like the idea of getting like a game for free just for me to review it was incredible.
Did you ever have like, do you have like any memories in your head of like getting a game for review from a publisher early that you were like, oh my god, I'm going to die if I like don't get this game early? Because like big ones for me were like any Kingdom Hearts or Final Fantasy were always like really big, especially because I could always rub that in my friends' faces and they would be like thinking I was like faking it. But like the big one for me that like hit more as I got later on in life in a kind of sad way was I got, by some miracle, I had actually gotten a back when Nintendo would like give out codes really early to like anybody. Not that it was easy, but I definitely like, it's because I had like friends who worked at Nintendo. If you guys don't know, Nintendo does all their PR through Go Colin, who's like basically like a sub branch of all their stuff for it. So Nintendo kind of does PR half in house and half through a third party. And so I'd gotten Animal Crossing New Leaf. I got a code 2 months before that game came out.
Wow.
And let me tell you, that was great, but at the same time, when you're the only one playing Animal Crossing, it's a lot less exciting.
Yeah.
Like, imagine the way everyone is sharing all this stuff for Animal Crossing on Switch, and it's just one guy on a Twitter account being like, look at this shirt design I made. So by the time the game came out, I was just kind of like, all right, I guess I'm done. I reviewed it, so I had always like, I'd picked it up and played it more, but it was one of those games that I loved getting early for the fact that it was fun to like have this like, okay, hey, this is one of the rare cases of a game I would want early digitally, because it's like Animal Crossing is a game you just kind of want to pop in and out of for it, but yeah, having that game early was like such a weird moment of me like, I wish I knew anyone else playing this game right now, because it was just like, I felt so alone in my little like 3DS town. My animal friends were fun, but boy, just would have been nice to have anyone else talking about that game with.
For me, well, the thing is, with most of the games I play, I tend to review more niche JRPG titles.
The good ones, the good games. Those casual Nintendo games don't count. I understand.
But yeah, so most of the time, that lends itself well to a solitary experience. I would say the one game that's like popping out of my mind that I got early, like it was Mario Kart. It was Mario Kart for the Wii U. That was Mario Kart 7, right?
No,
or was it
Wii
Mario
was
Kart
8? Yeah, it was 8.
8, right? Okay. I was trying to remember because it's been such a long time since I picked it up. But yeah, so it's Mario Kart 8 for the Wii U. I got it a full month, and for me, that was the first time I actually had an entire month to review this game. And it was crazy because I was like alongside these really big websites that had gotten the game at the exact same time. So I was just like, oh my gosh, like Nintendo loves me. So and then after a while, I played with the AI. I wrote a piece about how it cheats because it does. It hates me. Mm-hmm. And but then I kind of also wish that like during that month, it would have been nice to be able to play more with other people. Like, of course, you had all the reviewers who were playing it, but most of the time, you were pretty much by yourself. Yeah,
like, if you weren't, because rarely, and this very rarely happens, like, publishers will set up multiplayer events for reviews, but even that, it's like, especially for Nintendo games, it's such a small pool of people actually checking it out and who's going to actually participate on time.
Yeah, exactly. So then, by the time that when the game actually came out, and everyone was having so much fun. They were memeing Luigi's face.
Oh my god, I forgot. Yeah, the Luigi death stare. Jesus.
Yeah. And it was just kind of like, man, like I wish I had this community when I was playing it.
God. See, that 6 years feels like a lifetime ago.
It does. It does, honestly.
Have you ever had a game where you got for review where you were like, I have no interest in this series, but I'm just gonna check it out, and just ended up soaking it up like a sponge? Like a big one for me was I reviewed for like a really tiny, it was like a friend's like blog basically, but they had a contact at NIS America, and they were like, hey, no one wants to review this, but do you want to review this Vita game because we know you like Vita? And I'm like, oh sure, whatever it is, I'll check it out because I'll review anything. Like I played Hooking Let's Fish Go On or whatever.
Oh my god.
I've played all sorts of games, good and bad. So what was so funny was I got Danganronpa 2 like a month early. And my only experience with Danganronpa was previous co-host of the show, Melissa, was a huge fan of it. And I had always heard about it, but I had no idea what it actually was. I had no idea it was a visual novel. I had no idea about the courtroom stuff or the mystery. All I knew was there was a funny-looking bear in the game, and the game name sounded funny. And if it wasn't for me getting that game for review, I don't think I would have gotten into it as hard as I did. And it's so weird because it still worked in terms of I played that game and I got, I think, halfway through the game and I immediately stopped. I got a notification. I texted my press contact at NIS America. He was a friend of mine at the time. He's not there anymore, but I said, okay, Danganronpa 2 is amazing. When is the first game going on sale? Because I need to play the first one as soon as I'm done with this. And a rare example of me buying a game digitally, because I already had the second one digitally, and this was in the era of the first one was kind of hard to find, and I wasn't super into Vita collecting, so I was like, oh, whatever, I'll get it. And he said, give me a month and I'll let you know. And he texted me like right as soon as I was about to beat it. He was like, okay, check the PlayStation Store, and it was like $10 or whatever. And I was like, all right, let's go. Because it was like right before the second game was about to release, so it was like, of course they discounted like crazy so people would check it out. But it was one of those ones of not only like how great that was to go from the second one immediately then into the first one, but because those are like so disconnected. Like they're connected obviously, but like it's like how you could still play it and appreciate it and then go back to the first one and have all these aha moments in reverse, which I still really appreciated.
Yeah, it's true actually. For me, well, actually, it was funny because I actually reviewed both the first, second Danganronpa games. I also did the spin-off games, Ultra Despair Girls, yeah, which is really good too. But yeah, it was the first one was one of those games for me where I wasn't really that familiar with it. You know, I think I had covered a few trailers here and there about it, but I never played it myself. And then when I actually got it, yeah, it just totally clicked, and I ended up just falling in love with it. And another game for me, which is funny, it was released by Sega, Seventh Dragon 3 Code VFD. I remember I did like a big preview on it, and I never heard of this franchise in my entire life.
Seventh Dragon was one of those early DS RPGs that that was like what the Operation Rainfall kids would be begging for to come out, and for whatever reason they finally gave us the third one. It was so weird.
It was, yeah. And so I've never played this ever in my life. And then I got into it, and I fell in love with it. I couldn't believe how much I was enjoying this game. Like, I love the music. I love the combat system. I love the plot and characters. I love the fact that, like, you have this main character who at any time you could just completely change up their look, their gender. It didn't matter. And it was just so much fun. And so that was another huge shocker for me.
Yeah, that's one of the like nice parts I definitely miss about writing and covering for like just all sort of games, where you can just kind of like sink your teeth into like so many different things for it. Especially because at the time when I was doing it was that era where there was a lot of indie games, but not like it is now, where there's just everything is out and everything just looks like hot trash. Like I enjoyed like finding smaller titles and like contacting the devs and being like, yeah, check out our game, like little things like that. Whereas like now I'd be like, listen, unless you're like someone I've like probably like heard from, there's a like really, really, really low chance your game's actually going to be pretty good or like kind of worth reading, which I know is super mean and super disrespect, but like it's just like the thing of like, and I've talked to like other developers, it's just like if you are releasing a game on Switch, PC, or even PlayStation to a lesser extent, it's just open reign. Anyone is releasing everything, and the markets are it's just the floodgate is open into an extent, which is great for releasing, but you know, like half of these games aren't making like any money. And it's not because of the quality of their game, it's because no one's getting any eyeballs on them.
And that's the problem. And then it's on our end, you know, we have to kind of be discerning because we only have so much time to really play them. We can't play every single game that comes out ever. So we have to, and also, you know, we have to be honest, we have to look at the finances of sites that we work for. You know, it's like we can't have every single game on the website because let's say we a 3,000 word review for it, and then barely anyone looks at it. And then so you took a lot of effort that you could have spent on a game that would get more eyeballs on your site, and you put it towards something that's not going to get any traffic. And, you know, that's great if you just, like, kind of blog just to blog. But if you have to deal with more finances of a site that's paying their writers and whatnot, you have to consider that, too, the hit. So it's just like how developers have to try to get eyeballs on their games to sell. We have to make sure we pick the type of games, too, that are going to get people attracted to our sites as well. So that's, like, a really... Like you said, it feels mean, but it's like an unfortunate reality of this kind of thing.
Yeah, because much like anything, it's like even this podcast. Hosting this podcast is not free. It's a passion project for me for sure. But it's
Yeah,
like I would not be sinking like all the money I am into hosting fees every month if like 10 people were listening to the show. As sad as it is, I
exactly.
would do this show for one person a month, but it's like financially it'd be a lot harder to make any sense of that all.
Exactly, and that's how I feel too. It has to be some people actually listening. There has to be people to enjoy your art, even if you're doing it for the sake of art. People still have to be out there enjoying it. Otherwise, you're just kind of putting it off into the void.
Hence why I've seen very, 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 very many Persona and SMT related podcasts start up and then usually die up before the episode 10 mark.
That's true.
So kind of going in, following reviews, what was the review process for you like with Persona 5 Royal? So you started playing it what, like end of February or so?
Yes.
So what was that whole kind of process like for you in terms of playing through the game as well as kind of the process of writing it, and just how did your opinion of the game kind of gestate from getting it all the way to finishing it and then publishing that review?
So in terms of the process, I just kind of had, in this case, I had a stricter time limit because, this is a bigger release, so I had to make sure that I played through pretty much most, if not all, of the game in that time, and, had everything written out. I think for me, how I tackled this one was because I knew that, as we talked about earlier, this is essentially an updated version of the original P5, so I had to make sure that everything in my raw review wasn't just a retread of the original game, that all the new content shined. So that was kind of the biggest focus I had writing this. I had to make sure every single thing about it talked about all the new features and how these new features affected the gameplay, how it affected the story, how it affected how you would perceive the game and take it. And I had to think about it in both people who were coming in for the first time playing Royale and any P5 veterans who were on the fence or already thinking about buying the game. And I had to think about, they're going to have very different outlooks on this review and of Royale in general. And how do I write this review to actually appeal to both of them and make them both understand if this is the kind of purchase that they'd want to invest in. So that was the main process for me in that. In terms of me actually writing the review, in terms of me actually doing that and playing the game, it was surprising how much fun I had with it, because I think I came in very neutral playing P5R. Like, I really didn't have super high expectations for it. I was just kind of like, well, let's see what they have to offer. And it was funny because I ended up giving this game a 9, and it was funny how I came out of this experience absolutely really loving Royal overall. Like I did like the third semester a lot. I love the new scenes they added to the game. I loved all the quality of life changes they made. And so it was kind of weird how I went from a neutral to an extreme outlook on this game.
So this is a weird question, but how did you feel about the original Persona 5 for you? Like, if you kind of had to sum up in like a tweet-sized review in a score, where would you have put that before you started playing Royal?
Let's see. When I actually got my hands on it, I would say, while I feel the game was ambitious in certain aspects, in terms of its interface and the story it tried to tackle, I felt that it was a mixed bag almost in terms of how they succeeded. And, and that, I guess that would be my tweet size thing. And to elaborate a little bit, I guess how I feel is like I overall I felt the story was strong, but there were parts where you did have issues with pacing, and that was something I even addressed in the Royale issue. Pacing's a big problem until you get to the 5th dungeon. It's extremely dense. So for some people, they'd be fine with it taking in all these story beats, and for some people, it's very difficult to get through. So I think that was something that I wish that Royale had addressed and it didn't. But that was a big issue to me in P5. I felt like sometimes the story, while I love the fact that it had a very central theme and stuck with that theme, I felt like there were times where they could have inserted a little more complexity into the plot, to actually challenge the characters and their beliefs more than what they did. In terms of gameplay, I really like the gameplay. I guess how I feel is after this, I really wish that they would overhaul the gameplay in like the next Persona game. I feel like this is the most you can do with the one more system. I don't think there's really anything else to do with it. It's not as strategically deep as the press turn system of the mainline, Shin Megami Tensei games. So I would love to see that in the future as well. Also, if they could overhaul the social link / confidant system. While I like the confidants in this game, I feel like once again, there's really nothing else to do with this system as it is. So I would love to see that changed or incorporated more into the main plot line, or just something that makes it feel fresher.
Well, and it's so funny you bring that up about the one more system for it, because one of the things that I thought about a lot after, because basically once I had finished playing through Tokyo Mirage Sessions Encore in January, I had then started up my playthrough again of trying to get through P5 before Royal was out, and man, I don't know if you've played Tokyo Mirage Sessions, but that game's battle system is so flashy and so fun. Like after 30 hours, how I never got tired of just watching everyone when they're doing their sessions, and so fun, so fast. And it's like Persona 5 Royal does a lot to kind of fix that in terms of the speed, especially with how fast and snappy everything is. But it was one of those funny things of because at the time, it was a lot tinier of a audience who was having this discussion, but there were people who genuinely were like, hey, Persona 5 is a really good and popular game and all, but there was that tiny little group of people who were in the minority of hey, I actually like Tokyo Mirage Sessions better as an RPG. And after it's funny, I'd played and beat Tokyo Mirage Sessions, but somehow decided not to beat Persona 5 for all these years. But I definitely have a much greater respect having gone back and now beaten both of those games again. But yeah, it's so funny of how this Wii U port, I kind of felt the battle system was a little bit more interesting in terms of its depth and its loop for it, but obviously Persona 5 is almost four times as long of a game as experience, whereas Tokyo Mirage Sessions is you're gonna see everything in about 30 to 50 hours.
Pretty much, yeah.
So yeah, so if you, I'm sorry if you would kind of said it for it, but I don't know, did you, I guess, sorry, I'm totally walking all over myself. Did you look into much of the original game before jumping into Royal, or did you just kind of jump in as fresh as you probably were after the preview event?
I jumped in fresh. I had previously played Persona 5, but I didn't feel any need to really replay it or anything. I wanted to jump in fresh and see how I would, because I wanted to, keep the knowledge in the back of my head of Persona 5, but at the same time, I think, when I had mentioned before that I kind of had two brains working, I had to think about a new audience jumping into this game, as their first one, and I wanted to have that part of it, as the freshness, So I wanted certain things to be kind of a surprise for myself again. And there were times, too, where a story beat would come up, and I'm like, oh, I forgot that happened, or, oh, wait a minute, was that a new feature? And I would have to remember that, yeah, it was actually that, the original one didn't have it. So I tried to have that balance of keeping it fresh, but remembering some of the biggest parts of the original.
See, for me, I thought it was really funny my biggest fear was I'm going to beat Persona 5, and whether I love it or hate it at the end, spoilers, I loved it by the time I'd beaten the game. My original complaint with the biggest one was, holy crap, that entire last palace and boss section is just the most unneeded filler I've ever seen in a video game. Sorry, that's not fair. I've seen the original ending of Bravely Default. That game is a national sin, and anyone who wants to play that game is actually a sadist. So it's just not a good last palace, and also this podcast will forever trash Bravely Default's ending, because that is are you aware of how bad the ending of Bravely Default is, of what you have to do for the true ending?
Oh no, I that's the thing. I actually, funny enough, reviewed Bravely Default, and I love the game, but yes, I do remember that That part.
Do you love beating the game multiple times?
No, but I do love it. Like I think that's what I did love more about Bravely Second, because I didn't have to worry about that. Like obviously they realized, okay, wait, we can't do this again because that was a terrible idea. I don't understand why they did it. It didn't need the padding. It was perfectly paced the way it was before, and then they kind of just added that. And it was such a bizarre design choice. I don't know.
Yeah, it was definitely a choice. That's the nicest thing I could say about Bravely Default's true ending mechanics. But yeah, so after beating it, my biggest fear was, okay, am I gonna be burnt out? Like, cause no matter how much they could have added, there's a lot of just original Persona 5 still in here. All the changes aside, like, listen, there was a lot of stuff that just wasn't touched for this game. So thankfully, I never really had that, and I feel like it actually gave me kind of a leg up in terms of I could be overly critical, whether it be for the better or worse, or the detriment of the game. And a good example would be like every palace. I was like, okay, I know what is different, and it's not always just a case of, hey, they add an extra room or two for the will seed. A good example is Okumura's palace is very, very widely regarded in the community, even though it's really funny. I never felt this, even though I was blowing through the game for review both times, of like that first like the first game's, not the first game, Persona 5's original version of Okumura's Palace is very long. There are very large sections of the game, especially the one where you are having to ID like the chief, the chairman, the co-chief, the chief, co-chief. All of those, like that whole section is just a giant maze of rooms that splinter into other rooms. And when you go into Royal, it is just maybe a fourth of the size. Yes, and when I went into that, and I was like, wow. And I was actually worried because one of my things I really like about the palaces is when they have a really good flow to them in terms of, hey, here's the puzzles, here's the mechanics. I was worried it was going to lose some of the stuff. So, like, I was worried there was going to be less of the, like, I guess, for lack of a better word, like the flip puzzles where you're going and flying through space, like in between all the different little space stations. But like they trimmed off enough in like sections like that I thought really, really just made them better versions of themselves. But then at the same time, I've never had this with the re-release of a game more than Persona 5 Royal. Remember how I said I hate how much filler in the original game is that final palace is fighting the Holy Grail? Persona 5 Royal just says, fuck you, do that again. They change nothing in that whole section. All they do is they add like a few grappling points to grab meaningless treasure chests, and literally, I don't even know if they know that they did this. That boss fight is the only one in the game that's not changed. Did you think that boss fight was so perfect you had to leave? It was just so weird to me. Like, because like in my brain, I was like, oh my god. I actually texted like a friend of the show, like Darley or whatever. I texted him and I went, hey man, heads up, the ending of Persona 5 and Royal is actually somehow worse, just because it's like, because I had just done it a couple of weeks earlier.
Oh, and then you had to redo it again.
And just redoing it all again, because like they don't trim anything out. It is just so monotonous, and just like, it's cool the idea of diving deep and going into mementos for it, but that section of just boss fight cutscene, and oh my god, like listen, I don't know who thought they did a really good job with the writing, but the moment when you're in the velvet room and you have to go break everyone free from their jail cell, I'm like, please, can we just get all of this, everyone? Because like it's not even like, I get it, like symbolically it's really interesting, but literally his text prompts for everyone are the same. Like,
that's the
and obviously,
problem.
when you play Atlas games long enough, you realize outside of one or two instances in games, your text choices are meaningless. You are
pretty much.
Whether you decide to sleep with everyone or befriend everyone, it doesn't matter. You're just the Chad to everybody. Everyone knows you're the Chad, and you're gonna live your life as the Chad. So obviously, like I had that chip on my shoulder already, but like towards the end, I was just like, wow, this is so bad. It's like the boss fight had no new mechanics, and it was just like. And it just really sucked because, like, I get it, that boss fight's already doing a lot, and it would be hard to add on to that without feeling like you're bloating it. But, like, I feel like it almost would have been one of those things of, like, hey, even if they just did this, make the first Holy Grail fight have, instead of you fighting it and then dying a second time in the middle of the streets, cut that out, also add Kasumi in, because the little cutscene they have, of Kasumi right before the Holy Grail Palace section. Like, you know, when she like stops into LeBlanc and is like, "Hey senpai, just wanted to let you know, I know I saved you in that one palace for one battle, but I'm not going to do that for this next section. I don't exist. Until the next year, I don't exist at all. You're not going to see me for a single second. I know that I'm a Persona user and the world's about to end and everyone's going to die. You can't use me. You just can't use me at all. And I know you bought $15 worth of DLC, but listen, that's only good for one dungeon, baby. I'm just that good." And I'm like, I get it. They, like, the real reason she's not playable in any of the other palaces is, guess what? Then they would have to make changes to the animations or the other little things.
And the cutscenes.
It's all cost. I get it, but it's like, could we not have just had her as a fucking like sticker or a line JPEG or a GIF or something in the corner and just like not even like, and it was one of those things of like, I feel like almost even if they broke their rules for New Game Plus, like, I would almost forgive all of my complaints about how late you have to wait to play as Kasumi. Like, if they kind of did what Tokyo Mirage Sessions did in Tokyo Mirage Sessions with Encore, you always have to have the main party member in your party at all times as playing it. So you're limited to at least 1/3 of your party is always going to have that, like, lightning ability. But in New Game Plus, you can have whatever party you want because guess what? You've already seen the story. It doesn't really matter. So, like, the fact that in Royal, like, it would have been really nice if in New Game Plus it'd be like, hey, you can just use Kasumi in any battle in any palace on New Game Plus.
That would have been amazing.
Because guess what? And we'll get into DLC later for it. I again can't stress this enough. I paid $15 for a girl's costume set, and I can use it in one dungeon at the end of this 100-hour RPG.
I know, exactly.
It is so weird to me, like how like they just go out of their way to be like, we're different. Hold up, not that different. You gotta wait till the end to get that different. So like that one was just like such a bummer to me, and it really sucked because like I appreciate like the praise and the stuff that they've done. I really liked. Like I don't know about you, but like what boss change really sort of stood out to you in terms of whether it be their palace or their fight design?
You mean like in terms of the original, or like in terms of
like a good example like for me would be like I think Okumura's is probably the best acquitted from in terms of the palace is a lot more trimmed up and different, but still fun and still has a lot of good like puzzles to it. Whereas also I like his boss fight more. Just the simple act of adding in Robot Haru is I think a really nice touch to that in terms of like, yeah, it is kind of weird she was never in there, and it gives him that little bit of extra like F you dad energy. Like he didn't really need it, but also I'm sure all the Haru fans enjoy having a new version of her to look at.
Yeah, exactly. And it was funny because I remember right before when you're about to enter, like, I think it was, you have to do the calling card, and when they were having the discussion, and Haru was even wondering, like, why isn't there a cognitive version of her? And, Morgana was basically like, well, there's several reasons and you're not going to like it. I'm just like, oh, wow. So he doesn't even care about her. And then when I actually played Royale and boom, it's like he actually had her in the boss battle. I was like, oh, wow, that's actually interesting. Like, I actually like that. I really enjoyed that a lot. So I agree with you. I think Okumura's dungeon and boss, I think, was the best version of it. Like Royale really did a fantastic job, streamlining, trimming out the fat of the dungeon itself. And then, of course, in the boss battle. Another one that I actually really liked, and I wish they had just done even more with, was Kamoshida's boss battle.
I've been saying it myself. If Shiho gets a bunny outfit, why does Mishima not get a bunny boy outfit? It's just not right. It's just he was diddling both of them. It wasn't a one-way street. Those bruises run deeper than skin. He's seen some things.
Exactly.
He got hit in the face with more than just fists. That Big Johnson was going places.
Oh my No, that's how I feel too. It's like, I think I even said it in my preview when I had done the boss battle, that I really love the fact that we got, a cognitive Mishima and we got a cognitive Shiho. Like, that was awesome. And then I was like, man, I really wish they just had dug deeper with it. really just like tied it in and made it even more painful for like An, especially seeing that.
Yeah, because
And
it's especially weird because they do a good job of like addressing it, and like thematically they set up something and they just like once you kill her it's just like okay, back to normal. It would have been really cool to be like, and I'd mentioned this I think like in the last like 2 weeks ago with the podcast of even if they just did something different, like, hey, if you want to destroy if you want to destroy the cognitive Shiho, On won't attack her. She knows it's not real, but like it's like in the end of Metal Gear Solid 1 where it's like Fox knows he has to shoot Gray Fox and Liquid, but it's like I can't do it. It's like if they had like little moments like that of like this is really tough for her, like she can't do it, or even after you defeat the cognitive version, like they actually react to it outside of okay, back to hitting them.
yeah, exactly. I felt like if they really had just like completely overhauled the boss fight to incorporate them, and like you said, the reactions of An especially, I think that would have been phenomenal. Like that's been really cool stuff that you could have added. Like maybe like I don't know why, I'm just throwing something out there, but you know how in Final Fantasy X you had like the talk prompts,
Mm-hmm.
and remember how like in one of the last battles where Titus, excuse me, could have speak with the final Aeon, and it was just really heart wrenching because that was his dad. So and you actually had like effects because of it. It would have been really cool if you could kind of have like some kind of prompts to kind of, even if you didn't want to actually do anything gameplay wise, but if An had special prompts, when she could try to call out to Shiho, even knowing that that's a cognitive version. But, that kind of thing, too, would have been really interesting to do, just to kind of show, like, she's not just a playable character. She's in this dungeon fighting her sexual harasser and then having to fight her image of her best friend. It's like, make it more, like, engaging and, like, heart-wrenching, I feel.
Yeah, like I really love that they brought negotiating back with Persona 5, but I think it would have gone really far, like you're mentioning, if, let's say, during the boss fights, obviously you can't negotiate and like capture their demons and stuff, but like every boss fight is related to someone who's in that boss fight, like hypothetically. So like the fact that like let's say you had a like prompt with Yusuke and Madarame and we're talking about like his mother and stuff and like things like that would like give him a buff or give the boss like a debuff and like stuff like that could be very interesting without having to go like too out of budget.
That's true. Actually, if you wanted to keep it in budget, I just remembered Shin Megami Tensei 4 and Apocalypse actually did something similar, where sometimes the boss will ask you questions during the fight, and depending on how you answer them back, either you'll get a debuff, and the boss will either get a debuff, you might get a buff, or you might get debuffed if you answer incorrectly, and the boss gets powered up. So that could have been, like you said, a really interesting way to do it while staying in budget as well.
With you, how did you feel about the change of negotiations? That was like one of the things I was surprised I didn't see more reviewers kind of bring up. The game doesn't really do a hey, look at this is new sort of thing. So similar with the Baton Pass just being available for everyone from the get-go. I feel like the changes they did in the negotiations are so good to the extent that like that's why I kind of wish negotiating was a little deeper, because it was now so much easier, because like negotiating Persona 5 and even other past like SMT games with like talking to demons has always kind of felt like I'm half guessing and I'm half doing a crapshoot, because you're not like just guessing, hey, what does he want to hear? You're also having to think, okay, what kind of attitude is this demon going to be in?
Yes.
And so like just giving you those little bits of like advice, whether it be with saying its mood or Morgana commenting, like I've heard some people who are already like not super big fans of Persona 5 being like, oh, you're just making it too easy baby mode. But it's like, what's the fun in doing that and being wrong 2/3 of the time? Whereas I felt like it was the inverse now in Royal, whereas like I still got it wrong every now and then, but I had way more luck with it than I did previously.
Yeah, that is a good point. I mean, I'm someone who I feel like a masochist, but I love demon negotiating, even though a lot of it is, luck. Because sometimes even, you'll get it right, and then the demon decides, screw you, and they'll take your stuff and leave.
Mm-hmm.
But, I don't know. I guess I really like having to really just sit there and think how to communicate with this demon. But saying that, I did like the quality of life changes. It did make things a lot less frustrating. And I think you still did have to think about the demon, but it was just you kind of got a reminder. Because sometimes you do forget. You know, you're going to forget, oh, wait, what was this? What was the mood of this demon? Wait, how did they speak? What should I say to them to that they would want to hear? And I think I think that extra mechanic itself is really helpful. It's a good reminder so you don't have to try to keep all of that in your head at all times, and you're already trying to balance a lot of other things in the game. So, yeah, I really like that as well.
Do you ever, when you're reviewing a game, like say when all the other reviews come out, do you find yourself looking at other people's reviews and kind of looking over them in terms of like, okay, this is interesting, like, did this person necessarily agree with similar points to me, or, oh, I wonder why someone didn't bring this up? A lot of the reviews for me I was surprised how high a lot of them were, and I felt like a lot of it personally was, and this isn't even like me calling you out specifically, it was just for the majority. I felt a lot of it was people were giving this points. They were like, here, we are reviewing this game as if this is the original Persona 5 review, and it's just adding on points because it just has more stuff. Which I feel like a lot of it, and obviously this is a hard game, because like you were saying, am I reviewing this for a newcomer? Am I reviewing this for people who are coming back to the game? Like, are we reviewing this for the weirdos who are like Spencer, who just played the vanilla one and are now jumping right back into the royal stuff? It's like, there's a lot of different facets in terms of how you come at this, but I feel like a whole lot of it was similar to like the preview stuff was like, hey, the base game is still primarily there. A lot of it is still the same thing. Is the changes and whatnot are still nice and are good to point out for it, but a lot of the little things of like, hey, what did we lose with these changes? Like, what are the grander effects of this? Like, hey, how did this like actually like affect it with whether it be like loading or like even just like new little things of just like, hey, look at all these like. Look at all the extra time you have at night and like what that actually does like to your game in terms of like, hey, I was halfway through that game and I maxed out all my stats, and I was like, what am I doing with the rest of my life? I've read 40 books in 3 months. This shouldn't be possible.
I know, it's crazy when you think about how much Morgana was holding you back all this time.
It's even better when you have those because the game, for like give or take a couple of story-related nights, literally you can always do something in your house, even if you've already gone to the metaverse, which is a really nice feature because obviously people memed that to hell. But it's so funny because then the moments where you are forced, I love going through and looking at all the dialogue prompts to see if because they had to write new stuff. Because originally before it was, oh, you must be tired, go to bed. Oh, you don't want to do this, go to bed. So now my favorite would be like a good example of when Morgana's really moody and right before he's about to like bail and go to Haru and stuff. There's that night where you can't do anything, but if you go around and do all the prompts, if it's most of them, it shows him depressed, being like, you don't really want to make tools, do you? And then for whatever reason, I thought this was so funny. The plant one, it's still happy-go-lucky Morgana being like, how's that plant health doing?
Oh yeah.
I'm like, all right, I guess we can't think about everything in advance. So like for you though, were there things you were surprised people kind of latched onto with a lot of different reviews, wish they would have talked about more? I know a big one for me, and I've heard a couple of different people's reasonings for this. I truly cannot wrap my head around how few reviews talk about this game's DLC to a baffling extent.
That's true. I'll admit I was one of them. To be honest, I'm just gonna outright say it. It's because I don't buy it ever. Like and this is like something that's just consistent with me with DLC. I never buy DLC like that. So when I'm reviewing a game, I'm reviewing it as a person who's trying to focus solely on the base game.
And because, I think a lot of reviewers are like that, but then it comes to weird moments of, as a reviewer, what was your initial reaction to the twins coming up to you saying, hey, inmate, we have this new mode, it's called Challenge Battle. And you go, all right, let me try this out. And whether you liked it or not, you're like, oh, that's interesting, let's see what other challenge battles there are. No, those are all paid. You get one. Like, I cannot think of a game that has been more in my face about, nah, you get one of these. The rest are all DLC. And it's just like it's not like it's hidden. It's just the game goes out of its way to just be like, hey, here's this new mode we made, but you get like one sixth of it. And the fact that like no one, because like I don't know, how did you feel? I personally loved challenge battles. I thought they were really fun in terms of like a little score attack thing. But just having that one set of boss fights, even though you could change the difficulty, it's just like it feels like you're playing a demo. It's so short and you don't get enough to really sink your teeth into it.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with you. It's funny because when I tried out that mode, I did like the first battle that you had access to. And then I was like, oh yeah, that is kind of in your face. And then it was kind of weird because I got back into the main game, and then I ended up getting soaked into the mini games instead. I don't know why this happened to me. So then I got to the end, I was like, oh my gosh, I completely forgot about the challenge battle.
Yeah, a lot of people I think definitely kind of did. Like even other little things I was surprised that I hadn't heard about before, like the fact that the darts minigame is the most like launch 2013 designed PlayStation 4 minigame I've ever seen with like the motion controls. Like I actually love that. Like I love when they like kind of go out in terms of like how weird it is, and like they make that dart minigame so like weirdly in depth in terms of like how it actually levels up your party members and other things like that. And then it was also kind of a bummer that then it's like, hey look, there's billiards. You can just watch them play. Like I would have loved to be able to actually play billiards with people the way you can play darts, because like you can sink your time, and like when you do a 701 game of darts, it's like you'll be there for like probably like 5 or 10 minutes.
Yeah, it's true. I loved the darts mini game, and I do agree. I really wish, and it was kind of messed up because then you're playing through a catchy social link when they're both playing billiards, and it's like, man, I wish I could actually just play billiards. That would have been great. But yeah, I did love that too. That they actually took that darts mini game and they made it very in depth. It reminded, of course, I'm sure a lot of people said this, but it reminded me of like Yakuza in that way, where they actually took the mini games they had and actually just fleshed them out. And the fact that you could actually read and gain a new mechanic for the, I think, what was it called again? It was that mechanic that I think it was like the thieves like vision
Oh
that
yeah,
you have in
it's
the
like
dungeons.
yeah, it's like the third eye for when you're playing
Yeah, the
darts.
third eye.
Mhm.
And you actually get that, and you could actually buy better equipment for like that was really cool. So I really enjoyed that a lot. I wish they had done that for Billiards because this was fantastic. Another one that I really liked was Thieves Den.
Thieves Den is criminally, capital C criminally under talked about, and even after it is out, underplayed.
I
And
know.
it is so fun. The dialogue in there is actually really interesting, especially once you beat the game and have all the characters and stuff in there. The fact that it just lets you run around as any of the Phantom Thieves and all their different outfits, whether it be like, hey, here's casual Kasumi, or hey, I'm going to play as mouse form Akechi, is insane. You can play as cat, like actual cat form Morgana. Like they went into all these crazy little like details. All the music is really, really great. All the unlockables, the resolution that you can zoom into for all those art pieces is fantastic.
Oh yeah.
And it's like it's like they made a social hub. It's like the really lo-fi way I've described it is they made a single player version of PlayStation Home out of a bonus section. But this goes into my biggest complaint with it, and I think why a lot of people aren't talking about it. That hub feels like it was designed to be a multiplayer space. Like, why are there multiple, like, why is there a couch, and why are there multiple tables for Tycoon? Why are there, like, 5 different setups for the music to select? And it's really, really weird because, like, I feel like, and, like, I don't know how much you really played of it. I can just sink hours into Tycoon. I legitimately love that game. Like,
that game was amazing.
It's not too complicated. It's really fast and it's really fun. And like, imagine how fun it would be if you could invite 2 or 3 people into your Thieves Den. You make a playlist, sit down, and just play Tycoon for like a couple hours.
Oh, that's so true. That's a really good point because I absolutely adored Thieves Den. I love the fact that they actually tied it into the plot somehow. That blew my mind too. And then just like Tycoon, and it had this really nice touch too of when you're playing with your party members and how they actually have voice lines in there too, so it feels like you're actually playing with them.
Some of the voice lines in Tycoon are like my favorite, and like my favorite is ever going against Yusuke, who he takes every game of Tycoon so perfect, and I've never enjoyed a line from Yusuke more than him just anytime he loses out, he just the most defeated sound possible just goes, "I'm poor now."
Oh yeah.
Because never forget, guys, Yusuke is the world's best representation for a real-life art student. He is always spending all of his money on useless shit, and he's always poor.
Exactly. So that was amazing. I love when Ryuji if he comes in last place and like everyone else beats him, he's just like, "You guys are monsters."
Yeah, like they put so much effort into that, and it's just such a shame that like I don't know if it's just because it's like out of the menu. Like they make it so that you can really play it like unless you're in Mementos, you can play it almost anywhere. And they always update you with like, hey, there's new stuff. And I think the best way to experience it, a lot of people have just been, oh, I'll get to it at the end. And I'm like, listen here, Mr. BS, Mr. or Mrs. BS. No one is going to beat Persona 5 and then immediately think now is time to jump into the Thieves' Den. It's more fun to go in whenever they add new stuff to just not only kind of see what it is, on top of just like the award section. I know a lot of people have either been really for or against the revamped trophy list. I think it's great. I think anyone out there who's like, oh, it's too easy now, I'm like, listen, you still have to play through this entire game.
Exactly.
Any game that is like 100 hours to platinum, you can't say it's an easy 100 hours. That's just kind of a non sequitur, really. So like, and on top of that, they have all those awards, and those awards are actually really, really fun, and some of them are really challenging. And the fact that, like, they are 3D actual trophies you can unlock, it's really nice because it gives those people like me who I wanted to experience all of the new content in Persona 5, for the most part, without feeling like, oh my god, I have to get, like, the compendium, or I have to do all of this. And even, like, little things of just, like, hey, it's really nice that one of the secret bosses you don't have to start New Game Plus for. And I've seen so few people actually do this, but like the fact that so I call him Jose. I know the game says it's Jose. It's Jose.
I know.
No one calls him that.
I know.
I'll get used to Sakamoto. I'll never get used to Jose. He is Jose to me all the way. Like his secret boss fight, I've seen almost no one talk about, and it's really cool because like when you're in that third semester, once you've gone and done the whole of Mementos, you can go back and fight him in your first playthrough, and it's like one of my favorite bosses in the game.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think a lot of the time too, because I mean I don't know, maybe it's just my corner of social media, but I noticed a lot of people didn't talk about third semester because they weren't trying to spoil it since it still recently came out and all. So I feel like that's something that was held back. Of course, the reviews don't talk about third semester stuff in general. Because very spoilery, can't really delve into that. So I think a lot of that kind of holds people back more from really digging into it like they wanted to. So I really wish that people would, because there's some great stuff like the Jose battle that or just other things like that I want to see more people really delve into.
I felt so shackled because originally my plan for my review was to just have it be kind of spoiler free, and I eventually got to the point when I was looking at the flow of everything and how I was talking about it, and I was like, listen, by the time this is out, I could have just reviewed the game spoiler-free halfway into playing the game then. Like, you get enough of an idea, and I really just kind of want to deep dive into it because, and whether we end up doing it or not, like, the third semester of the game, without even really getting into spoilers now, it's like, it goes into such interesting themes and goes into all these characters. Like, a good example is, you can still beat Persona 5 Royal and not see the third semester. Do you know anyone who ended up not fulfilling the requirements?
Personally, no, I don't. I think, I think most people that I know of, they actually fulfill the requirements for it. Because I think, honestly, they're pretty easy. I feel like, in my opinion, you have to really go out your way to not do the confidants necessary or what have you, or the other things that you needed to get into it. And I think that's kind of by design. I think that was the point that they did it right.
I think an important thing to bring up is Kasumi is so easy. Not in terms of her personality. I mean, I'm sure she's probably a little loose, but listen, she's got 5 social ranks. Like, she's pretty easy to max out in the, like, 6 months or so you have in the game to really do it.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing that I could see it come up, because I've actually had at least 2 people now beat Royal and not unlock the third semester. Because
really?
one does not like Akechi, and you have
Yeah.
to do his manually now. Which,
That
by the
was
way,
my...
we'll get into this. I don't know how you feel about it. I love... I went from I like Akechi in vanilla Persona 5 to I loved Akechi at the end of the game. Like, he is now, like, probably actually now my favorite character from it, just because, especially in that third semester, he goes into so many different weird ways for it. And I can see why people still hate him as a character, but the game does some really interesting stuff with him. And another one did it because they thought Dr. Maruki was really boring, and I'm not gonna lie, Dr. Maruki is really, like, interesting as a character, but this is his storyline. Start really, really high with lots of great snack jokes and really, really fun, and for, let's say, being being generous, 6 of his 10 social ranks are very boring because they are all text. A lot of it is kind of rinse and repeat of like, okay, are you asking about cognitive science because you're the bad guy? Are you just genuinely curious? Like, what? Like, until you get to the third semester, Dr. Maruki is like, what is the point of you? Because, like, he's a genuinely interesting and charismatic character, but they don't voice so many of his lines. He just feels like his importance to the story could be that of, like, a Yoshida. It's like you're around, but you're not really active participating into it. And I'm really glad, and if anyone out here is like not know, good news, he is not just the generic, and my biggest fear was the third semester was just going to be this. Kasumi's the bad guy, or Dr. Maruki's the bad guy, and ha ha ha, I'm the evil villain all along, you guys never would have guessed. It was like, of course, there's 3 new people in this game. It wasn't going to be fucking Egghead over here. He's just sipping flower juice. What do you think he was going to do at the end of the game? So I'm glad that didn't happen, that it wasn't, like, it was a twist for sure, but, like, both of those characters never just kind of felt like, it wasn't the, aha, I've been lying to you moment. They're all believable storylines, and Maruki's story, for me, didn't really get interesting until the end, when he's about to finish his paper, and I remember for me, it's when you're at the buffet, and his friend comes. When his friend is sitting down with you talking about, like, oh, wow, you're doing a lot better than, like, you've been recently, and you, like, kind of find out about how he'd, like, lost the grant and stuff, as well as, like, how, like, he broke up with his girlfriend, and it makes him really uncomfortable. That's when I was like, okay, now we're getting into being a really interesting character. Like, the game, for him in the vanilla story, whether it just be because they couldn't fit it in more naturally or whatnot, it's like, yeah, as a confidant, he fits in just normally fine like anyone else, but he's totally forgettable until the end, for at least my opinion, of, like, he has interesting moments and stuff for it, but I would say his best moments before you get to the third semester are when you meet him at the end, when he's finishing up his paper, and all of those little moments that the story shows you already by default when he's talking to the Phantom Thieves one-on-one. Like, my favorite with his was, well, not all of them, but for most of them, like, my favorite was at the school festival when Yusuke goes back and they both share lunch and talk to each other. I really like that one.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, I guess for me, I have sort of an opposite opinion. Like, from the very beginning, I was really engaged with him as a character. I think what I appreciated the most, because, you know, I was of course worried too, like you said, when they brought him in as his therapist, and I'm like, oh my God, is he gonna just turn out to be another evil adult, and it's just gonna be a setup of it? But then when I actually started, watching these cutscenes with him and, dealing with his confidant, I was really, really surprised. I think, I don't know where they got this research from, but how much they really portray therapy properly, They did a great job with that. Like, I was in awe when he was having his sessions with the party members, when you're having your one-on-one sessions with him, and how he was actually behaving like a therapist in real life. The fact that he was trying to make his whoever he was speaking to comfortable. He wasn't delving right into the main issue. He just wanted to check up on them and their lives and make sure they were doing okay and making sure they were comfortable. And I love that he was very awkward and human, but he was a very caring, very charismatic and kind person. And you could see that he just cares too much about people. And I guess that's why I even like just like those slower moments in his confidant, because I felt like you were getting more insights into him as a person with the kind of questions and the back and forth you were having with him. And I guess I just really appreciated the kind of level of sensitivity that I think went into his writing, and it could have gone very south because, I mean, I'm sure you've seen it too. People try to write therapists or anything like that, and it's completely wrong.
Oh yeah, like
And,
even especially once, like, without kind of getting into it, like when that third palace starts, it would have been so easy for it to immediately just be like, and now he's the gross doctor. He gets his patients and does whatever he wants with them. It's like it would have been so easy to like just get the like evil doctor like stereotype, and that to the very end he always sticks true to his character. You just keep finding out more about him is what I really, really loved about it.
exactly, and that's what I love too. And I guess I really fell in love with him as a character. Honestly, I do think that the one crime is that he should have had way more voice lines. Like
it's really weird because like Kasumi already has a lot of voiced like scenes and stuff for it, just because she doesn't have a ton of confidant ranks before the third semester. And if you notice, the third semester is primarily voice acted. Like almost all of that outside of like really small social stuff is like all voice acted because it's very story heavy.
Yeah, absolutely, which I love that, honestly. And so I think, and I know that most confidants aren't really fully voiced, but I think they should have had an exception with Maruki because, I mean, he's a really big central character. So I think if you had most of his stuff voiced, or at least the bigger moments of his confidants, like, you know, when, like you mentioned, we started getting into his later stuff, when his friend comes in, or like, you know, I feel like that would have made sense to actually had voice too. That way you could have felt even more engaged with him as a character.
I think a good example of what they should have done is how they reworked Akechi's social link in terms of Akechi has a lot of just dialogue ones still, but he has moments like in between leading up to that, because for most confidants, and like this is 90% of all the confidants, rank 1 is voiced, rank 10 is voiced, everything else is just text.
Yeah.
Which like I think is like obviously a budgetary thing for it, but with the fact that one of the things they touted with Persona 5 Royal of, hey, we're adding more voice acting, they add in enough that, let's say, it made the game feel like it went from 30% voiced to 40%, but there's still so much that's just text, and I feel like one of the biggest things that would have like made this game a really big selling point is just making everything voiced. And obviously, like, you don't have to make everything voiced, but it's another thing that going from Tokyo Mirage Sessions to Persona 5, everything is voiced in Tokyo Mirage Sessions, where you're then going on to this game where sometimes everything's voiced and then other times it's not. So because they were picking and choosing scenes to be voiced and other ones to not be, like, even if they just like stuck with all the story stuff they wanted to as their own, like making things like the confidant's voice. Like a really weird thing was we found out pre-release of the game, like they'd never advertised it, that Takumi is her voice actor changed for Royal. And I was like, okay, so are they adding a lot of voice acting in, or maybe does she play a big part in the third semester? She has no new voice acting lines. They just replaced the voice actor, and it's like, what? Why?
That was so weird.
It's that, like, that's really weird. Like, it's not like a, hey, we needed new lines kind of thing, or the person wasn't available. Like, they just reused all of her lines. Like, the person for Igor didn't come in and do new lines for the third semester. Guess what? I'm gonna spoil it right now. Igor doesn't do shit in the third semester because that voice actor is still dead in Japan, and they're like, well, we'll just put in we'll put in the little girl, I guess.
I know, that broke my heart actually, because then I was mad because his original English VA was so good, and I was like, please don't tell me they're gonna replace it, and that's what happened.
This is the weird, I've always this is a weird non sequitur, but since we're talking about Igor, so you know before they replaced him in 5 that he'd already been replaced in Ultimax, right?
Yeah, I know that.
Like, with Vic Mignogna, I don't know why, but Vic Mignogna did a really, really good job replacing him for it, but, like, to my knowledge, and no one's found this out, unless the guy just stopped voice acting, that guy's still alive. The original voice actor for him is still alive and stuff.
And he still voice acts, so it's like, why did you replace him?
Because I don't mean to be mean, but I'll be mean with new voice actor of Igor. That is a really bad voice.
It is.
It does not fit him at all. I'm like, welcome to the Velvet Room.
Oh my god. And I actually like the idea that At first when you first hear Igor's new voice, they actually made it plot relevant, and I was like, oh, that's a really cool touch. Are we gonna hear the original Igor? And then of course they don't. I was like, so what was the point of that?
Yeah, it really sucks because if you know that it actually works a lot better in Japan. The way it worked, because the voice actor died in Japan, they have the different voice in the Japanese version, but all of his lines when he is the original new Igor again, like after the original Igor comes back, it's just reused lines from the Persona 3 movie.
Yeah.
Which obviously that was never dubbed, so they couldn't use over here, but it's just one of those weird things of like, yeah, like the voice for fake Igor does a better job at being Igor than the actual voice of Igor is supposed to sound like.
And that blew my mind. I was just like...
Would have been nice to fix that voice, but I guess we gotta fix the hot goth doctor. Instead of making her sound too old, we gotta make her sound like a 20-year-old anime girl. Because, like, the girl who does her voice for now is fine, but that was one of those voice acting changes that kind of sucked for me, of, like, I liked that she sort of sounded like the disgruntled, like, older doctor, and now she just kind of sounds like another 20-year-old. It was, like, one of those moments of, I love Ashley Birch, but I hope that even Ashley Birch knows that she did a really bad job as Rise. And it's not because she's a bad voice actor, it's just because that's not the kind of voice that Rise goes for. So the fact that, like, we couldn't get Laura Bailey in her last performance of Rise just because she was doing fucking Gears of War. It's like, man, I get it. That paycheck had to be way bigger than whatever Atlas was going to pay. But, like, that's that one little mark, because I actually genuinely really love Persona 4 dancing. And, like, I think that, like, that epilogue and the story mode genuinely makes me cry. Just because, like, it's such a nice goodbye. Because the ending of Persona 4 dancing is just the extended ending of Golden, of everyone, like, meeting up again, and it's so perfect, and I love it. And then it's just like, oh, and also we put this person with a Rise mask. It's like,
oh yeah, I was like, ah, man.
Yeah, that one definitely that one was definitely not a hit on the voice actor train board. But how did you feel about the added in voices scenes for Royal, though?
Oh, you mean the new... I loved it, because I had mentioned, I remember back when I did an interview with the head of PR for Atlas West, we were talking a bit about how, they actually had the old character, the old VAs come in and revoice certain lines and voice new lines, because they had to deal with the inclusion of Maruki and Kasumi and things like that, and how smooth that transition was. And then when I actually played the game and I heard it, it's phenomenal. Like, the stuff that they did add sounded fantastic.
Did you play Catherine Full Body last year?
I didn't play Full Body. No, I had played the original Catherine. I do need to get around and play Full Body.
Full Body has unfortunately the opposite effect of Royal. Rin is a really good character, but all the added cutscenes with her feel very shoehorned in. It's really unfortunate. So I was really glad that Royal did not suffer from that.
Me too. Yeah, they did and I think that was really just not only the talent of the VAs, but I think the writers, like the localizers as well, did a really great job, like writing that out and fitting everyone in properly. So it felt very cohesive. And I do agree with you about, I really wish that most of the game was voiced, because for me, I had gone from Three Houses, which is fully voiced, completely. And that was a huge thing. And then, I go from that, which was, phenomenal job, and then to Royal, where I thought that was going to be the same thing, and I found myself enjoying the new voice stuff, and I was like, why couldn't there be more of that? That'd be amazing. I would love to hear way more of these characters.
Okay, now comes for the hardest part of this whole podcast. Who is your favorite and least favorite character? They have to have at least a main voice actor, but it doesn't have to be, like, you can pick a confidant for a favorite or a Phantom Thief for, like, a least favorite. As long as they have a voiced role, you can pick a favorite or least favorite out of that.
Okay, so my favorite character is Yusuke. I love him. And my least favorite is Akechi.
So, I'd be curious for you. So, in terms of Akechi, does it kind of go down to the whole, like, hey, he's still a bad guy at the end of the day, and it's hard to really redeem him for what he did?
Yeah, that's how I feel about with me. Like, I think at least for me, because there's villains that I do like in other media. You know, there's some villains that I know are completely irredeemable trash, but I love them. But I wouldn't want them to be redeemed. And I think my problem with Akechi always is that the game was extremely quick to redeem him, and especially through that whole redemption is death sort of trope. And that frustrated me, especially in terms of how the characters reacted, like especially Futaba. Like, you know, keep in mind, like, her mother's death was a huge for her. I mean, it completely altered her entire life. And she even has lines where she'll never forgive the adults who did this. And then you find out it was Akechi who did it. And then she kind of just like, and I know they were trying to go with the whole, you know, I'll reluctantly forgive you. It's like, but why do you forgive him? What makes him different? Like, he still killed your mother. And I just wish that if they were going to like go that route of really delving into his backstory as to why he did it, I wish they had given him more time and a bigger arc to do so, you know, and that he has to, if he's really going to actually be redeemed, it has to start from he himself wanting to change and then him having to put forth all that effort to do so, and then maybe the character slowly, you know, warming up to him a bit more. And I would have been fine with that. But I think it was just the way it was handled. It really made me very sour on his character, which is a shame because I did think he could have been very interesting.
Did you feel like the additions to his confidant rank didn't really do much to address your issues? Because really, and I mean this with the most respect as a fan, his confidant rank is great, but it is basically just making Ren X Akechi fanfiction canon now.
Yeah.
Because there were many moments playing through his confidant rank where I went, man, these men, they have got some homosexual energy going on. We got them going to the jazz club together, getting fruitinis. We got them in the bathhouse, steaming it up. We got them like be like, I'm sorry, is this where you live? I'm just gonna get coffee here for the next couple of weeks. It's like I loved it because it's like the most canon gay this series has gotten in years, and it's so funny because like if you go through that whole route, like obviously you could choose choices to just kind of be blissfully ignorant, but man, I took every gay choice possible. I'd be like, I'm just like, you want me to dress you up some other time, or like putting his glasses on Akechi. It's just like the fact that their confidant didn't end with them both playing tonsil hockey and deep tonguing each other was truly surprising to me.
I actually agree. It was funny because I went from, I mean, I still like you said I still have my issues with him, absolutely, because a lot of those are endgame Akechi issues. But the confidant itself, I actually really enjoyed, and it almost made me like actually like him more. And I was just kind of like, oh man, like there's so much potential here. Like he really flows very well with Joker, you know. And it was just such a shame that like you went from them, overhauling his confidant and giving you all this fleshing out of his character to his incorporation in the third semester, which I thought was really great too.
He steals the whole third semester. For me, like it's him. And then until, like, the halfway point with Maruki, it definitely, they kind of, like, share that. But, like, alright, I guess this kind of leads into, like, our next point. But I guess we have to talk about the Poochie the dog of this game, who, unfortunately, is Kasumi. I like Kasumi. She is easily the least interesting part of this whole game, which is not a slight against her. In terms of the main characters, I just really vibed with, like... I vibed with Akechi a ton. I loved Jose every time I got to interact with him.
Oh, yeah.
I loved Maruki. Like, Maruki stole the show from everybody towards the end. Like, I think the highlights of Kasumi is easily the beginning of the third semester, but once she sort of has her coming of age moment, because like this isn't really a big of a spoiler, she has two awakenings. There's one before New Year's and then the one after New Year's, which is like her true awakening. I think once that kind of happens and she becomes like her true self, I feel like her as a character just kind of blends into just being, and I'm one of the gang. It's a little too quickly for me, I would say.
Right.
But like, her being the weakest out of the new characters is not a detriment, because she's easily the best case of Atlas doing hey, we're going to add in a new girl, and she actually has good character development. Because I
agree.
know you said you like Deep Strange Journey. I think Alex's incorporation into the story was pretty ham-fisted and not super great. I actually like Marie, but I know she has a lot of complaints in terms of her relevancy to the story. Even other things like Rin, I know Rin isn't perfect. I think they do a lot of interesting things with Rin and Catherine Fullbody, but Atlas just has such a bad history of we're adding in a new character because guess what? New female characters are more marketable. More marketing means more merchandising. And I'm really glad Kasumi didn't come out of that, because one of the biggest worries a lot of people had, and this is really weird that I would get asked this, but when Royal was out and people would watch me play it and even know I had it beforehand, the biggest question I got is Kasumi a Mary Sue? And I never thought about that. It was kind of interesting of like, no, but I can see why people would think that. She's the honor student who got brought into the school. Everyone is expecting great stuff from her gymnastics career. She's supposed to get like preferred treatment and stuff like that. So I could see how they did that, but her story treatment was so great. Like, unfortunately, her only standouts to me are, at least in the main story, of that scene where she is having a talk with the vice principal and Dr. Maruki's there about her getting third place in the nationals. And I loved that whole conversation, because that whole scene, you can just see her just like on the verge of tears, because it's like, hey, this is the girl that everyone basically brought into the school because she was supposed to be like the female version of Kamoshida in terms of, hey, having her in the school is going to make us look better. But because she's just not living up to the expectations and everything, and they're just being blunt with her. Like, the vice principal, yes, he's being like unfair and stuff, but like that is how Japanese schools and stuff work. It is about clout. It is about recognition. If you bring in this girl to get bronze medals, no one's going to be impressed. It's a waste of your time and money.
Exactly, and that was and honestly, I agree with you. Like, I came in pretty neutral with Kasumi as well, because I was wondering how well they were going to develop her character and how well she would be incorporated into the story. And yeah, I think they did a phenomenal job with her. I really love her as a character. I found her arcs very engaging. And I think my biggest thing, and I know you had mentioned this earlier, but was that she wasn't incorporated enough into the gameplay, and it drove me nuts.
Yeah, every scene where you think she should be in there, like even if it was like after summer vacation, there's that moment where she kind of gets her persona officially.
Yeah.
You're like, okay, she's now going to be in the party, right? And the game just goes bending over its back at every chance to explain why she can't be in the party, and the excuses for it are just trash. It's so clear that it's just because they couldn't fit it into the game system and they didn't want to have to add in all this new dialogue. Is really, really disappointing. And like the fact that obviously it's not like they're going to patch the game to make her more playable for it, but like it then goes back to the complaint of like, yes, you can complain that they sold DLC for this character separately on all these other fronts, but like it is so boggling to me that they would make DLC for this character that you can only play for at best is like 20 hours.
Exactly. And it was very disappointing because I really liked her. I loved her design. I like her outfit. I loved her persona design. I loved her abilities.
Did you get her third evolution persona?
Yeah.
That one. Also, in general, all the third evolutions are amazing. I actually don't super love most of the second evolutions for people. I think a lot of them just sort of look more weird. But I love that they take that into advantage of when you get the third evolution, it's meshing the best of both forms into the third one.
Yeah, I agree.
And like some of the big standouts for me are the third evolutions. Like I won't spoil it, but like because I think the designs are just that cool. But my favorites were Ryuji's third form, Makoto's third form. Oh my god, Yusuke's third form. I'll spoil this. That persona's heels alone are amazing.
Oh my gosh.
like 19-inch heels. They're like reverse stilettos of just like they're like someone made meat chops into heels. That's insane.
Oh. They are. I agree. I really, and I love that idea. Like you said, like they just merged together the because I think thematically it works really well too. Because it's kind of like, oh, it's not like you're becoming an even better version of yourself. It's okay. Well, you have to acknowledge that first form is still you as well. And and I like that idea of it combining with the other version of yourself that's more truthful. and you just create this like new part of except essentially you're accepting yourself as a whole person. And I really love that theme a lot. So I think thematically that was perfect. And then like the designs are phenomenal for them. So I think for the second tier I only really liked Ryuji's. Because I pretty much like any version of a Son Goku ever.
That's true.
So
I don't know. I like Ryuji's second form, Satan Tyson, but
yes.
It to me looks like someone made crossover fan fiction between Dragon Ball and Ape Escape, and even as a lover of both of those, it's a little uncomfortable to look at how buff he is.
Yeah.
So I want to get your opinion. How did you feel about the conversations? So maybe, I guess, if you don't know, the way you get the third evolution is if you have maxed out someone's confidant rank in the third semester, you unlock you unlock basically like an 11th rank conversation of they invite you back into their room, cough cough, basically hey, we need to add new assets, so we'll take all those rooms we made from Persona 5 Dancing and throw them in the game. When I saw that those rooms were directly from Persona 5 Dancing, I was like, okay, should I be more mad that you just asset lifted it from the game, or were these only in Dancing because of Royal? I was trying to be like, which one copied who, because clearly someone was lazy.
Exactly.
But like, I loved the idea of how those conversations start, because the opening premise of the third semester is so interesting to me. I was sad though, because everyone's conversation to unlock their third persona is like the same. It's, I'm sorry, I messed up. It's okay. You sure? Okay. Whoop. And it was like, I would have liked it to kind of get into more of it, because it's like, you guys don't gotta feel that bad. I feel like we could have like had a group meeting and just made that one day, because the fact that like if you do it with everyone, you have to do that 9 times of having the same conversation of like, I'm sorry I'm not honest with you, it's okay, I understood why, okay, thanks, friendship restored.
Yeah, I agree.
That was the only negative, like, this is such a tiny little thing. It was just kind of sad, because to me it just reminded me of that scene where you're breaking them free in the jail at the end of the vanilla game, but just in their room, and which kind of was disappointing.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. I think that was like if they were going to have it individually, when I was coming into it, I was expecting it to be like more involved, like something more dealing with maybe their confidant's conclusion tied in maybe with the third semester, like kind of relating it, like how it would affect them on a personal level, and then really just kind of personalize it, make it unique for everyone. And that's what I thought they were doing. And then, like you said, it's very, very repetitive. And yeah, it was very disappointing, especially because the designs and the theme of the designs themselves were so good, and then how you get them just falls flat.
So, I'm going to let you pick, because we've been talking for about 2 hours now. I'm going to let you choose how you want to wrap this up. Do you want to wrap this up now, or do you want to have like a quick gush session / pick each other's brain on the third semester spoilers galore?
Well, if you want, we could. It'd be fun to kind of delve into a little bit of our thoughts, to the third semester, how plot points were handled, things like that. Why not? Let's do it.
Okay, so I'm gonna let you go first, because I feel like I'm just gonna go on a tangent. When it comes to third semester, what was your biggest highlight and why?
For me, I think, like you said, I really loved I really loved Maruki a lot. Like, I love the fact that he wasn't just a really stereotypical evil guy, at the end of the day. I was so worried they were going to do that. Instead, they really just kept his character so consistent with his overall story and the main plot, and then also his confidants. And so you understood why he was doing what he was doing, but obviously you know what was wrong with it and why, like, it wasn't obviously the best choice. So I really liked that a lot. I thought they did a fantastic job tying that in all together. Another highlight for me was the dungeon design itself. I thought was great. Like, I just feel like the design of the dungeon itself is so clean and kind of sterile, but then like very bizarre
Yeah,
as well.
it's almost like kind of like a nightmare hospital at the same time, because like with like the dragging hair and the security cameras, it's very kind of haunting, especially by the time you get to the very top of like Eden and you see like all the statues of Ruri and stuff, of just like how much you can tell he's still so heartbroken about having to have given up all of this first persona, which, by the way, I cannot believe I did not get this spoiled. What the game thinks the biggest spoiler is that Kasumi is actually Sumire, which that's a great twist, and we'll get into that probably. My biggest twist is the last villain of the game is straight up an adult Persona user.
Yeah,
which is great to have again in a way that totally makes sense, and the fact that his persona ends up secretly being an SMT9 reference and 5 people are going to understand it is amazing. Like, the fact that they had Adam as the final boss was so insane. Like, I had to look it up in my phone of like, oh my god, like, when is the only time we've seen Adam? And it was like, yep, fucking SMT9 on the Xbox.
I know. I love that. It was such a cool reference. So
and honestly, all of his like forms for like that whole final boss was so interesting. Of who was your final boss party?
Let's see. It was, of course, I had Kasumi I had to throw in there. Let me think. And who was it? I by Endgame. Oh, Makoto was another, and then I believe An, because by that point I actually made her a pretty fierce blaster.
Mm-hmm. So what you're saying is your party was just team hot bitches. You just had hot bitches for days.
Yeah.
One of my favorite parts of that ending boss fight, and they do this a couple times with, like, let's say if you have like the titular character in a boss fight, like if you have Haru fighting her dad in his palace, but like that Maruki, because he's had moments of talking to everybody, if you have in your party, he will directly call them all out of like, hey, like my party was Joker, Ryuji, Akechi, and Kasumi. So what happened was, like, he had moments, and he does this with every character, and I double checked this, of whoever you have in there, he'll have moments of trying to plead with you at the last minute, of being like, Ryuji, what about your mom? Like, do you really want to like make your mom have to keep worrying about you because of what you did to your leg? Do you really want to go back to that future? And like talking, like, especially with like stuff like Goro, because oh my god, when the game pulls the old, like his whole chapter is the best. I think he's the best palace, he's the best boss design.
Oh,
he's the best everything. The best calling card delivery of just that moment of him coming to LeBlanc at the end of the day and you just being like, hey, you forgot something, and he throws the card on the table, and that moment of as soon as he gives you the card and you know it's about to go down, like it's about to go down, he's like, what's his big play? What's his big, you are going to really think this through? And I'm like, what could he possibly give to Joker? Because Joker's a pretty, like, blank slate. And his big thing is, hey, this Akechi's not alive. As soon as this is over, he's going right back to where you left him at the bottom of that tanker. This is the world you wanted, and you're going to be willing him away. And the fact that there's that great moment where where Akechi starts getting really mad at Ren, and he's like, "Hey, if you're having second thoughts on this, like, a game lets you pick it if you want." There's a really creepy ending. I don't know if you've seen it. If you tell
I have.
Like the ending, it's like the true bad ending of if you choose to like stay in the nightmare world of just that slow pan of like he just chooses to sleep forever. It's like really, really creepy with all the cobwebs, but that great scene of Akechi knows he's going to die, but his sense of justice is so honest and pure, even in this form that brought him into this world. It's like a weird reverse Sixth Sense, where like he knows he's been dead the whole time, but he knows that this isn't the world he's supposed to live in. He'd rather be dead than live in the fantasy world made up by another adult.
Exactly.
And I thought that was just that hit me like so hard. And like there was the fact that like the third semester has so many other moments like that. Like another really big one for me, like that made me know that holy shit, the third semester is real, is that first night's sleep you have of waking up in the school's doctor's office with the prison outfit on, and you're walking through after the butterfly, and you're just hearing the thoughts of all of your teammates of like, oh man, if only this had happened, or if only like Shiho had ended up like being able to like not get in that accident. Like hearing all of their true thoughts, like it set the tone so perfectly for that story.
It did.
Oh my god, yeah, like the fact that that whole last section is possible to miss is so heartbreaking to me, because it's like they just killed it. Like the writer on that did a great job, the localization team did amazing, like all the voice acting was really really good. Like everyone was like hitting on tens, like the surprises were really great, and like even just little moments that hit me in a way darker like feeling than I thought of, like holy crap, like seeing Sakura, Futaba, and Wakaba just having breakfast or going shopping together.
That broke my heart.
And knowing that you like that, like, because there's a moment when you're searching for everyone and you have to like, it's almost like you have to give them that inception moment of, hey, you know this isn't right? And then like you see that look on their face of when they're like, oh my god, this isn't supposed to be happening, because it's like I genuinely felt like so terrible. And, you know, like it does it better because like no other palace really made you feel like you were dealing with consequences, almost like basically anything after Kamoshida. Because like Kamoshida sets the bar so high in terms of how real shit gets, but even at the very end of the game, it never really lives up to that standard.
No, it doesn't. I think that was one of the biggest failings.
Yeah, so like the fact that the third semester just ratchets it up and just makes everything the same way of like, no, like we're going to make you like hate that you unlocked this. Like the fact that like honestly, if you get the vanilla ending in Persona 5, it's a lot more stereotypical, happy, everyone's going off on a road trip ending. But, like, going through the heartache of the third semester just brought me so much closer to everybody.
Exactly, because, you know, you really had that kind of bond of almost, like, having to deal with that deep-seated trauma of these characters, and then having to pull them out of their idealized versions, like those kind of dreamscapes. I think it was kind of like, it was funny because I haven't seen anything like that since Tactics Advance. Have you ever played Final Fantasy Tactics?
Yeah, that's a great example.
Yeah, and it reminded me of that because that was equally heartbreaking too, but you knew it had to be done. And it was the same thing with the third semester, the fact that it really hurt because it's like, what, you know, you don't want to just pull these characters out of like their happy bubbles, and they just, you know, they actually have some kind of happiness and carefree in their life, and then you have to just tell them, no, this is not true, you know this isn't right, we have to get out of this. And it really does hurt, and I think like you said, it brings a sort of like heart-wrenching element to the whole third semester, and I think to the ending as well. And then, you know, there was, and I think that bad ending was so interesting because I think it took the bad ending of Persona 3 and then made it even worse. Because you know how at least in Persona 3, the main character there, he wasn't aware either that the world was going to end. He had lost his memories along with everyone else. In the bad ending in the third semester, he remembers everything. Mm-hmm. So Joker knows that at some point this world is going to end and everyone will die. So it's like it just takes this really happy, you know, great moment, everyone taking a picture together, so sweet, and it just makes it gives it this like film of just horror almost, you know, like you know, he's really suffering inside because he wanted his friends to have this happiness knowing that it's going to all end, and essentially him and Maruki doomed everyone to dying prematurely.
Yeah, and it has so many layers to it as well that, like, I was thinking about, like, the only thing I think that everyone's happy scenario, the only way it could have been, like, the ultimate, like, oh my god, my heart can't do this anymore, is, like, Futaba is a really good one. Showing Shiho back again, I think, is going to surprise a lot of people, because that's like a big one of like, hey, like your only real time of seeing Wakaba is basically in the boss fight. And also, I will say the added elements to Wakaba's boss fight by having like dialogue talking about it, like more arguing with Joker and Futaba, I think is a really good touch. But
Yeah, me too.
man, if they were really evil, and I'm glad they didn't do this, if they made it so that Yusuke's mom was alive and still painting,
Oh
oh
my
my god,
God. That would've hurt.
because Yusuke's got it the worst. Like Yusuke hides it the
does.
best, but like he seriously is like, I have no like he's such a fucking trooper, and probably a lot of that is because he's like such a weirdo, but I love him for it. It's just like his mom is dead, he never knew his dad, his only father figure was using him and everything for it. So like if there was a scene of like seeing those two, like seeing him with a better version of Madarame was cool, but like man, if I saw him like painting with his mom, it would have been like, nope, you stay here, this is your world,
Exactly.
you deserve this, you precious little baby.
Exactly. Yeah, I would have broken too. I wouldn't have been able to do that. Not to him.
What were some little shout out to a scene that definitely didn't need to get added into the game, but oh my god, I'm so glad. And this isn't even the third semester. The food festival scene between Joker, Ryuji, Mishima, and Yusuke is a fucking treasure. And is amazing, of just the two of them being on the news. And their biggest thing is, oh, we shouldn't not be on the news because, like, we're the Fates of Thieves, that'd be bad if, like, we're publicly visible. It's because they went there without the girls, because they know the girls will be mad at them for going to a food festival without them. And it just has some of the best fucking lines. Like, I clipped it out on Twitter, but, like, just hearing hearing Yusuke saying the words cringeworthy made me so happy beyond belief.
I agree. That scene was fantastic. And another one that I loved that they actually voiced was the famous scene when you're on the train and you have and you know when the little girl comes in and you're trying to convince her that Morgana's a toy. So you get those choices of how you want to pet Morgana, and of course you do the button mash. And that was actually voiced.
The fact that wasn't voiced originally, that's the number one cutscene I've shown people that wasn't voiced before. Like people seeing that and being like, wait, that wasn't voiced? I'm like, oh yeah. Like it was funny because the animation was so over the top, but like now that it was all voiced and like actually hearing Morgana be like,
Yeah.
is just so great. Let's see, other little things I want to say. The ending boss fight is, and honestly, like the whole semester, you can definitely tell they didn't like hold out on the budget. Like my opinion on Persona 3: The Answer is it's a interesting conceptual idea from a story, but you can definitely tell the budget was pretty low for what they could do with The Answer.
Oh yeah.
Whereas the third semester, in terms of like, especially that last boss fight, is so cinematic. Like all the animated cutscenes look fantastic.
Oh my
Anyone
God.
out there who hears In Context, I Believe, and doesn't think that's the best song in the soundtrack is actually insane. Like when you're running up that tower, basically like when you're in Eden and stuff, and running up to his boss fight is just like I Believe is playing, and you don't get hyped, you're just deaf. You're apparently deaf, and if you're hearing this and you're deaf, then you can't be offended anyways. It was just, it worked so well. His boss themes had such a great like ramp up as well through all the forms of like fighting all of the different versions, and I know that a bunch of games have copied it, but it'll never not work on me. The fact that it literally ends with Metal Gear Solid by ripping off Metal Gear Solid 4 of Joker and Maruki having to punch each other to death is so great and so anime. I fucking loved it. Like
me too.
That is my second favorite part of the boss fight. My favorite part of the boss fight is that, oh my god. And like, oh, it was so good. The shot of when you're fighting Adam and Maruki has morphed inside him and all he can do is keep regenerating, and there's the animated scene of Futaba's like, the only way to stop him is when he punches, his head is weakened. And that shot of when there's that final punch and it just shows everyone holding his fist as they like tell Joker to like climb up to him and shoot him, and how it again rips off Metal Gear Solid but in an amazing way, where it shows Joker in the city skyline and you have to press the fire button to shoot the bullet at Maruki through Adam's head.
Yeah.
It was so cinematic, and the fact that like you can't screenshot that easily is a utter shame. But man, that whole boss fight was so great, and the fact that it ended in a way that like wasn't a cop out. It wasn't like, hey, we're gonna kill you because you're bad. It's like, no, we're going to stop you from doing this ever again. And the fact that he's still like, because like the game goes out of its way to like show you he's not a bad guy. He has a view of the world that is obviously out of like proportion, and you see through the amazing VHS tapes, which by the way, thank God all of those are voiced. Those VHS tapes are all amazing.
Oh, they're fantastic. I really love looking at those.
Yeah, like I cannot say enough like good things for all of that. For even going back to the first person reveal of Kasumi being the dead sister all along. Like, I wasn't surprised that the twin was dead all along. I think like they were pretty
they're pretty open about it.
Yeah, they're pretty open about it in terms of like obviously there was like some sort of like twist to it, but I definitely didn't expect the whole reverse like, oh, she was actually Sumire the whole time. I thought that was a really great reveal of like how that whole moment was in first person. I thought was really powerful.
I did like that cutscene a lot. However, how I felt on the twist, I felt like, in my opinion, that was, as someone who loved Kasumi, I felt like that was the weakest part of the third semester. I think the reason why was because I've seen that twist been done a couple times in other games, and I felt like
thematic... Final Fantasy VII. she's basically yeah, it is a very tried and true anime thing for it. I think if that was the big twist, that would have made it like a little bit weaker, but I'm glad that they kind of nipped that in the bud, if not to the detriment of her character.
Yeah, I mean, gonna mention with the World Ends With You.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that was a big one. And then the other one, if you played it was the second Ace Attorney game, Justice for All. It was actually I think it was in the second or third case. They actually did that plot point as well, but it was with the antagonist of that case, where it turned out she was the older sister, but she was impersonating her younger sister. And I think, like, in the cases that I've seen it before, thematically, it made a lot of sense why they would do it. So I was just kind of left, like, wondering, why would she do that? Like, it didn't make for her to impersonate her sister.
See, I would come from that as well, but that goes back to the VHS thing of, I was like, okay, I expected that. I think I give it a little bit more of a pass because of that moment with the VHS tape of Maruki testing out his powers on Kasumi, of him meeting her. She's kind of in that fugue state of like, okay, I'm neutral, I'm just sort of being depressed Sumire, and then him slowly using his persona's ability to turn her into Kasumi. It wasn't like that to me kind of gave me a little bit more of a pass, but like you were saying, it has been done a bunch. It has even been done in Persona before with Miki and stuff, so it's not even a first for the series.
Yeah. So I was just kind of like, I wish they had... I think for me, I guess I had kind of wished that they just delved more into her sorrow, because I think they would have tied in with Maruki really well. Like, the whole, like, sorrow of not only losing her sister, but her twin sister, and how impactful that would be on her life. And then tied in, of course, with her not being able to, get those same goals that her sister was, and having those troubles that she did at school. I think just exploring that on its own would have been incredibly strong, because I was expecting that to just be like the full brunt of her character arc. And even the fact that she was touching on the fact that, she has anxiety, she is clearly suffering through bouts of depression. I was like, oh, that would be perfect. That ties in so well with Maruki being a therapist. And so I kind of had wished they had just stayed a little simpler, but just delved more into the mental illness effects it would have on, technically Sumire. But, so I guess that's why, too, I wasn't that fond of the twist, because I felt like having that twist sort of zapped out the rest of her. Like you said, they had to nip it in the bud, and I felt like that was disappointing when you could have really given her even more punch by just keeping it simple. I mean, does that make sense?
Oh, yeah, 100%. And I think as well, they were... thankfully smart enough to have the foresight to lock off her confidant rank until she becomes Sumire, and those extra little 5 ranks I think help a lot. Obviously, a lot of them sort of lean on the fact that, hey, you're now going to be, there's 2 confidants. There's one for Kasumi and one for Sumire, and I appreciate there are those moments though that do give it a little bit more of like, hey, Kasumi and Sumire weren't like I love each other, best friends forever, like stereotypical twins all the time. I enjoyed how there were the challenges, and I think like when you see stuff like with the coach of like, hey, you guys weren't the same. You weren't because you were different people, so you can't just go back to saying you're Sumire because you're still acting like Kasumi.
Exactly.
So, like, yeah, having a lot more of that would have been fun, but it honestly comes down to, like, apples and oranges of, like, if the game's primary focus was just Kasumi and Sumire's twist is the big thing, it would have definitely kind of felt more of, like, a flat note. But, man, like, just Maruki on his own just totally steals the show at the end of the day.
Oh, fantastic. And I think he helped uplift, because I think you pointed out the original final dungeon of P5 was just so okay.
Yeah, it goes from literally Persona 5's ending goes from the casino is pretty interesting, got great music, interesting little twist, to Shido's cruise, which also has some trimming, but I will still reiterate the fact that you have to go through all 5 of the people for the letters of recommendation again, and nothing is different. I hate. Like, my whole time when I was playing through that section originally was like, you're not going to fight all of them, right? Like, they're at least going to, like, because I at least thought, okay, one of these people is going to be like, okay, yeah, here it is. Like, how funny would it have been? And they even almost tee it up. That the big Yakuza guy at the very end, you're like, hey, here's a tattoo design for you. Okay, here's the letter. Like, if they did that, that would have been so great, because guess what? You then go into another boss fight. But, like, Shido's cruise is literally 7 boss fights. And, like, 2 of them are interesting. It's, like, so frustrating. And this goes into a little bit of a nitpick I wish more people would talk about. There's a lot of reused puzzles, and it really is weird. Like, all of Kanashiro's palace, all of those pin pad puzzles are the same. So if you skip to the pin pads have not changed. Like, all the ways you find the numbers are different, but guess what? If you remember all of those passwords like me, you don't need to do that.
Exactly, yeah, that's what I did. I just used the old stuff and, okay, there we go.
Yeah, so, like, some of the, like, lack of originality stuff just kind of makes it stand out more when a lot of the stuff that's new works so well, but when stuff that's still in there from the original super bogs it down. But yeah, like, Shido's boss fight is really great, and then just goes for the super long slog and the worst section of the game in Mementos to, like, oh my god, like, even the fact that, like, all the cutscenes are the same, like, nothing is different. Like, literally, the game is just vanilla Persona 5 from the beginning of Mementos Final Palace all the way until Christmas Eve, where Akechi pops out and goes, "What's up, bitches? I'm still alive!" And I literally, it was like 1 a.m. when I got to that moment. I screamed. When I saw he was alive, I was like, "Oh my god, the game's good! It's new now! Thank you, Jesus!"
I know! I was dying in those...
Because my biggest worry was like, is the 3rd semester just gonna fucking be like a bunch of like story? Because like, if people don't know this, if you haven't beaten the original Persona 5, you can tell where the budget stops, or for whatever reason, because as soon as that palace is done, it is just nothing but story segments, and you're just blowing through those last 3 months. It's like, why are these even in here? Like, the whole...
Just skip it.
And that's what's so great, because the 3rd semester keeps that in still canonically, of like, yeah, he was in jail that whole time, but you lived through that what-if scenario, and it was real to you. Because, like, one of the best ways that they put it into reality of, no, that's still real, is the moment... the day after you kill, I think it's February 3rd, where the gang goes into LeBlanc the day after, and they go to Sakura, and they're like, "Hey, where's Ren?" And he's like, "What do you mean? He's in juvenile hall." But then there's that moment of like, but now that you mention it, I do feel like I just saw him recently. So it's like that great thing of, hey, everything is still the same from the ending of Persona 5, but all the characters just don't remember outside of the Phantom Thieves that they went through that with Maruki.
Exactly, yeah, and I really like that tie-in. I like the fact that, like you said, the 3rd semester just took that slog of the normal final boss and dungeon and just uplifted it, and I think it fixed a lot of the issues, like, with how great, how cinematic it is, how how punchy and just it really hits you. And then like the actual battles themselves, the boss battles are fantastic, with that final scene being great. And I think it just gives you that really great sense of catharsis that I think the original P5 just did not have.
Also, Morgana turning into a helicopter was hilarious.
That was. Oh my gosh.
It shouldn't be, but man, that was really funny. We need to wrap this up. I cannot tell you how much of a blast it was actually getting to finally get into some Personified Royal late game and spoilery talk. So Allisa, thank you. But before we tell everyone where they can find us and all the other usual stuff, final word on Personified Royal. What was something we didn't talk about that you really loved about the game, and what is something that you wish more people would talk about from the game?
Let me see. So, something that we didn't talk about. I think we covered most everything, right?
It has been 2.5 hours, so that is we covered a wide margin.
So why don't you go first while I try to think of something?
So my first one is a really tiny one, but I really, really loved it, was I really enjoyed, way more than I thought I would, hanging out with the twins. And I enjoyed those moments so much that I really, really wish that they had just committed and made that their confidant. Of like, yes, it's fun and it's a good way to motivate the player to start doing more persona fusing and getting used to that system with their confidant rank, but you can still just totally ignore it. And I think it would have motivated people a lot more to just be like, hey, go on these little like quote unquote dates with Justine and Caroline, and like they're so funny. Like going to the movies is great. Going to Big Bang Burger is hilarious. Going to the gym and just watching them hanging off your dumbbells is just like really, like they're just super, super funny and well written parts of the game that I've seen a lot of people just totally skip because they think it's a date, and obviously not a lot of people are going to want to go on dates with like what look like a bunch of Nanakos. So I think those are really great. And if you want to, there's also another really, really funny one of where you bring oh my god, I always forget her name, Lavienza.
Yes.
Where you bring her to your house in the third semester, and it's really funny because you just bring her over and check out everything, and she just it's like you have to babysit her for a day, and it's really great. Yeah, so that's one I would say that people need to definitely kind of check out more, and also counts for something we didn't talk about just because the twins I was never a super huge fan on, but I just appreciated the extra bit of usage and kind of wish there's a little more motivation. But what about you? Have you thought of one?
Yeah, so something that I just remembered we didn't talk about with, we could do it very briefly, that I was actually glad that they changed was the two infamous scenes. One was I know it was in June with Shinjuku.
With the beefy trendsetter.
Was it that one? Yeah, with the gay couple?
Yeah, you know what? We should talk about that because, so originally it was two homosexual men, basically, for lack of a better word, forcing themselves, and unfortunately they lost their name. They're now like Angel and something else. Fun fact, though, if you notice, the guy who is Angel, who used to be the beefy trendsetter, that is DC Douglas. He is that is the voice of Kamoshida doing the gay guy now.
Oh my gosh.
Really, really great. It's like really hammy voice acting. I would love to know what you think. So originally, and there was a whole big censorship deal for it, and when you kind of see what they did for it, it's kind of more head scratching than anything, but we can kind of delve into it quickly. So it went from two gay men coming up to Ryuji and basically, for lack of a better word, kidnapping him for whatever comedic reasons. And we heard at the preview event that scene had changed for the better because that made them uncomfortable. Yes. Apparently, what that means is two gay men taking Ryuji out on a night at the town unwillingly by his accord is not okay. But two drag queens taking Ryuji to dress up, that is okay? So I personally think that, and I mean, like, I've just heard this through, like, the grapevine of, like, having friends and stuff. There are already not a super great relationship between the drag community and the gay community, and I think that their change probably did more harm than good. But what did you think about that?
So with the original scene, I think the biggest problem was that it was more that, it was the idea of it was the implication that they essentially were trying to sexually assault Ryuji, and that was kind of the joke, like, because that's kind of like a big, very old school kind of joke with gay guys. The idea that when they're put in a lot of times for comedic effect as kind of a one-off scene, it's usually with the implication that for whatever reason they're going to sexually assault or rape or whatever a male character, or they have already, and that was essentially the implications in the original version. The funny part is with this scene, where they revamped it, was that they didn't just change it. They had actually gone to, I believe it was the PR person for Atlas Japan, actually. And they actually talked it over with him, and he, was a proxy for the devs. And they actually had discussed over changing it, because obviously they can't reprogram anything. That's not going to happen.
Well, because if people don't know, in the Japanese release of Royal, the text is just the same.
It is. Because they didn't change anything.
Yeah, the whole point of it is, listen, whether you're aware of it or not, we've talked about this on the podcast. Japan is not the most openly and forward trending thing, especially when it comes to like gay rights and representation of gay people in media. So that being a big deal to them is the most moot point ever. They're like, no, this is a gay joke. We can use gay jokes because haha, gay jokes.
Yeah. Although you did have people in Japan who were, gay and whatnot, who didn't like the scene either. So that is something.
It's just way less of a big deal, like to them, to the point of like that wasn't a thing. Like when Royal released in Japan, there weren't articles saying, "What? This scene is still in here?"
Yeah, no, it wasn't. You didn't have that mainstream kind of coverage of it. That was a big difference, absolutely. So what happened was that within the constraints of what they could do, they ended up changing it to. They mistakenly thought that Ryuji wanted to drag because he was hanging around apparently one of the clubs that was famous for it. So that was kind of where they went in that direction instead. So that was basically what they did with that. And then when they had the beach scene, they followed up with it where they were talking with Ryuji. Ryuji was like, no, I didn't care for it. And they were like, oh, are you telling me with all that chiffon, you didn't like it? And so, while it wasn't perfect, obviously, it did make me, it was a lot better to get through it, because honestly, I didn't see any purpose of the scene anyway in the original game. It just didn't add anything. It wasn't, like, necessary. So, at the very least, the revamp for me made it so, like, oh, okay, I got a few chuckles out of me. I was able to be okay with it because, I mean, at least it wasn't, like, implied sexual assault. I was like, okay, we're getting somewhere.
I mean, yeah, that is true. Optics-wise, it looks a lot better than be like, Ryuji basically got sexually assaulted, whereas now Ryuji got brought onto a quick episode of Queer Eye for the Straight Guy, or, depending on your point of view, RuPaul's Drag Race.
Basically, that's why I was like, oh, okay, this is a lot better, so, and so that's how I felt. I felt it made the scene, since obviously they can't delete it, it made the scene a lot better to transition from, and I didn't have to deal with how the original one did it. So my personal opinion, I was fine with it. I know for a lot of people, I don't know, they were upset by it. I mean, I don't know why, because it wasn't like they just did it. They actually did speak and get permission, and they actually had a whole conversation, and they had the go-ahead to do it. So it was completely, like, okay with Atlas Japan for that change to happen.
If you were Ari from Atlas West, who had made comments about the that scene as well as the Switch comment, if you were her and you could go back and scrub one line from history that would cause more people like basically, if you could cause one line to just erase from internet history, because I think honestly, if that like censorship line didn't come up, it wouldn't have hurt a lot of shit. And same thing with the Switch port update, or lack thereof. If you were her, which one would you have picked? Would you pick like, okay, don't comment on changing the dialogue for the for that scene, or don't comment on the Switch one at all? Which one do you think ended up making a more loud and annoying group of people on the internet?
Oh my gosh. I would say the Switch one, honestly, because
Same.
I think because I think with the scene with the gays, I felt like with those you were gonna get get problems no matter what. I didn't really care. It was such a tiny part. Most people didn't care, so I was fine with that. The Switch thing, I think that, and I met her before, in the preview event. She's a very kind person, and she was very, I know when she made that comment, she was very truthful about it. That's how she felt too, because obviously she can't control that stuff herself. So that's what I think she believed would be the best way to, I guess, get Atlas Japan on board. But at the same time, I wish she hadn't said it.
Yeah, I've talked to her a little bit. I cannot say this verbatim. I hope to actually get her on the show apparently one day. But I have to imagine she regretted saying that, because anyone who in PR could tell you what is that going to do. You work at a Western branch you take what Japan gives you. Atlas West gets zero say in any games. Whatever Atlas West said, let me tell you right now, they had no sway in the development of Persona 5 Scramble. They were like, listen, we'll take whatever we can give you, Daddy. Thank you. And so,
exactly.
and it just sucks because from an outsider's point, yes, it makes sense. You don't want fans to give up hope. You want them to think, hey, if you want this game on a certain system, go for it. But you also have to think about it. And I wish it would have at least been brought up of hey, instead of asking me at this preview event that for a game that's coming out in a month that's a PlayStation 4 exclusive, hey, should people not buy this game we worked really hard on and wait a year for a Switch version? Why would I tell you no?
Exactly.
Why would I be yeah, don't buy this, it'll come out on another system? I was of course.
I know. No, I agree. And I think more maybe she had wished she worded it differently.
Yeah, and obviously that quote was literally just taken out of a conversation of it's a very that whole event was very casual. That was not everyone sitting down having buttoned up interviews. This is someone working in Western PR. Of course they want on Switch. No one is sitting here playing Persona 5 on PS4 being man, this would be trash on Switch. Why would you want it on this platform? It's just everyone wants every game on every system if you want. Listen, I'm a PlayStation Vita owner. I've begged for a lot of games in my life. I'm not saying I'm perfect, but listen, you just have to think of the implications for everything in terms of the good and the bad, and you just got to be realistic, as it's not like Square Enix.
Exactly.
Square Enix has as much sway in the West as they do in Japan. They are a very equal global company, and Atlas is just not like that. That's it would be nice to have things that way, but we live in a world where they think releasing Sakura Wars before 13 Sentinels is right. And listen, that's just not the world I want to live in. Look forward to Dualshockers' review of Sakura Wars. I'm predicting, what do you guys do, on a 10-point scale, right?
Yes.
I'm predicting a solid 7. That game will be a very solid, at best, 7. I can't wait for that game to come out and people go, oh yeah, there's a Sakura Wars game, and then no one's going to buy it. I mean, listen, that game is the most non-offensive game ever. It really actually sucks because a lot of Atlas fans have been kind of wondering, hey, why are they releasing this game that came out in December 1st? But a lot of people are forgetting is what just came out Sakura Wars related, right?
What was it again? Oh my gosh, it's slipping my mind.
They just did the sequel to the game as an anime, and that just started airing in Japan and online.
That's right.
So obviously they're gonna release the game worldwide as quickly as they possibly can. But it's just one of those things of I think it really sucks because Japan had such a mute release to that game of
yeah, they did.
Man.
It was kind of out. I was like, wait, it came out already?
Yeah, so I don't know if you have seen any of the previews, but Atlas did, right before all the quarantine stuff, invite a bunch of people over to the Sega offices to check out the game, and it was kind of one of those things that it made me really sad looking at all the Western press, and it was just kind of yeah, it's not a great game, but I mean, it looks pretty, and is it's pretty anime, so it kind of sucks. It's just going to be one of those games that I feel is a disaster report for. Whether you think that game is good or bad, you might just forget that game came out at all.
I think that's the worst thing that could really happen to a game, just it being so kind of there.
Yeah. One day they'll talk about 13 Sentinels. It might not be this year, but I'm in a really weird place with that game where I need to write a editorial about why I think Atlas could release that game as a PlayStation 5 exclusive and do really, really well. And it's a really, really interesting angle for that game because that title was in such a weird flux of it was in development hell for so many years.
Yeah.
But I'm finding it really, really hard because like now it's like, hey, we don't even know if these systems are coming out this year. Like, the world's in such a weird place. Like, I can't even feel like I can put an article out anymore saying, hey, make this game a PS5 exclusive and it'll do well. Because, like, now we're at the point where even if PlayStation 5 and Xbox One Series X, like, Xbox Series X comes out this year, I've already heard a lot of people who are just like, hey, man, if I don't get a job, it doesn't matter what games come out on the system. So it's just kind of like, I'm finding myself very, like, hard to, like, having a hard time motivating myself to finish this editorial. Because it's like, yeah, like... boy, if I did this like a month ago, that'd be a lot more appropriate, but now it's kind of like, yeah, the world's in a lot different of a place. You can't really just... I wouldn't feel comfortable making such a blanket statement on a game, especially now that, like, man, this is a weird but interesting time for games. And just everything in the world, whether it be politics or even sports. It's like the world is weird right now. Everyone stay home and enjoy playing your games, and if you have to go outside, God bless you.
Exactly, you know?
Well, ending on that depressing note, Allisa, thank you so much for chatting with me for way longer than I would have guessed. And if you can't tell, this is why we have two people shows, because even a two people conversation will lead to a 3-hour podcast. Where can people find you online in all your writings, and where would you like people to, for lack of a better word, stalk you online?
Well, if you want my main bulk of writing, you can find me on Dualshockers.com. My name is, Allisa James, so you can look, if you want to look at my pieces alone, you could check out About Us, click on me, bam, there's my whole portfolio, but I would also recommend you check out the whole site. It's full of just great pieces overall. You can also hit me up on Twitter. My handle is James347, and just basically talk to me about anything. If you want to talk to me about Shin Megami Tensei, Persona series, any other JRPGs, just whatever you want, I'm totally open. And of course, check out, one of the podcasts that I host, Megaten Marathon. It's a lot of fun. It's a more casual podcast, but we just have a blast just talking about the Shin Megami Tensei games and mythology and everything that goes into them. So that's something fun as well.
Your guys' last episode was Persona 3. Do you guys have any idea when your next one might end up happening? I know everything's kind of weird at the moment, but have you guys talked about when you guys might do the next one?
We're supposed to be doing it soon. Hopefully we'll be doing it either this week or next week. Because, like, as you said, things did kind of put in, like, flux because of, very weird times right now. We're trying to map out each other's schedules, things like that. So, but hopefully we'll get that done within, this week, the next week. We'll have the second episode of Persona 3 out because it's a game that means a lot to pretty much all of us, It was a lot, for a lot of us, it was our gateway into a lot of the Shin Megami Tensei franchise in general. And it's just, it's a very significant game for that. So I have a lot of feelings for it.
And you had mentioned earlier that you also sometimes guest on a RPG podcast?
Yep, I do actually. So sometimes I guest star on another RPG podcast, and that one is a lot of fun.
Hold on, is its actual name Another RPG Podcast?
No. No.
I had just guessed that. If that was actually the name, that would have been creepy.
No, not at all. No.
There's so many RPG podcasts at this point that you just had to call one Another Podcast.
I mean, actually, now I think about it, that would have been a fun name. But actually, I like that name. It's called Combo Chain. So that's the other one. I occasionally go on as a guest, Combo Chain. And that one is more of an overall JRPG podcast. So we tend to mix it up. Sometimes we'll do an in-depth view into a RPG. Like, for instance, we did one for Xenoblade Chronicles. And then sometimes we'll do news-based episodes. So we'll talk about, recent releases or any, demo, anything that's upcoming that's going to come out, anything that was just announced. We talked about last time the Bravely Default 2 demo. I actually delved into a bit of the Persona 5R, my own review as well. We talked a bit about Tales of the latest Trials of game that I actually demoed myself too, so that was a lot of fun. So that's another one if you want to check out too. You'll get a host of other people as well. Kind of have their own input on the RPGs, and it's a lot of fun.
Have I missed the podcast about Criminal Girls?
I believe yes. They actually have that one, so you can check that out too.
All right, hey, if you can get something as obscure as Criminal Girls, that means you've really spread over the whole basket of genres in RPGs. That's a good sign.
That's true, yeah.
Well, thank you again for coming on. I had a total blast talking with you, and now after you said your name, I'm utterly terrified. Have I been calling you Alicia, or was I calling you Allisa?
I think Allisa, but it's fine because it's
only been 3 hours of me telling you the wrong name. It doesn't matter. I'll dead name you all day, apparently.
No, it's okay.
Well, if you would like to make fun of us for saying the wrong name, you can find me on Twitter. My personal account is @Torchwood4SP. Bonus points if you know what that's a reference to. @SMT Network is for the podcast and where I actually put effort because people like and retweet things on one, and the other one is mainly for me to post PlayStation Vita opinions that 5 people agree with. You can also find the podcast on iTunes. Super appreciate if you guys could rate and review us. Just search either Shin Megami Tensei Network or Persona Podcast. It should pop up like that. You can find our Facebook group by going to facebook.com/group/SMT Network. And outside of that, you can check out the review that should be up momentarily for Persona 5 Royal on the YouTube channel by just searching either Shin Megami Tensei Network or my name, which is Spencer Presley. All the links will be in the description below, whether it be the audio version or the video version. And I think that is just about it. Before we say goodbye, did I forget anything too horrendous?
No, I think we've pretty much covered everything.
All right. Well, thank you again for coming on, and I will let you say the final goodbye then.
And thank you very much for having me. And take care, everyone. I hope you had a lot of fun listening, as much as I had a lot of fun talking for about 3 hours about Persona 5R.
I mean, listen, I got to make it another week of bringing up Mishima in a bunny boy costume. I was happy.
Absolutely, that was the standout of this whole podcast.
All right, goodbye, everybody.
Take care.
People come and they go. Some people may stay with you though. I am all alone tonight, and I kept on asking myself questions. Consider time was a time I never really doubted myself, but tonight got me thinking about it all. If I am the fool or what not. I do not regret with my choices. I'm right.